Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Radio. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You can also catch us on SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, anywhere else that provides podcasts, even Stitcher. We are available on. Today's episode is going to be about my top 5 NBA draft prospects, and we're going to do a deep dive into each of those 5 players. To join me, I've brought back Cole Zwicker, who did the first part of this podcast with numbers 6 through 10. So how's it going, Cole?
Doing well, man. I'm kind of jealous that you get to see Jay-Z in person. Never have. So I heard he showed up at EYBL pretty quickly.
Oh man, this is a hilarious story. So, so he was at EYBL yesterday, and just the way that the whole thing came about was hilarious because I'm at the front of the facility because Marvin Bagley is playing at the time, right at the front of the facility on the court closest to the entrance, and I am at the far end of the court, where the doors are, just watching Marvin Bagley dominate. He went for 29 and 17 in that game or something. He's outrageously good. And I'm standing with Mike Schmitz from Draft Express. If you've watched any Draft Express video, you know who Mike Schmitz is. So we kind of hear a commotion behind us. You hear rustling a little bit. I don't know exactly how to describe it. There was a little bit of a buzz in the air. And we realize that, we turn around and we see this guy who's wearing a white hat, a white tee, and has a bodyguard around him, has a couple people around him. And we look and we're like, is that Jay-Z? And, Mike and I are kind of maybe, I don't know. And then we hear the voice. The voice is anything, any time you have ever heard Jay-Z impersonated on Saturday Night Live or whatever, TV show you watch, whatever sketch show you watch, whatever, where he does the half cough laugh, says man every other word. It's the weirdest thing that it's exactly right. He sounds exactly like his impersonators sound, and it was just ridiculous because we're just we're 5 feet away from Jay-Z. EYBL is nothing in the world that you will ever attend in your life. It's the weirdest phenomenon because you'll brush past Chris Paul, you'll brush past Russell Westbrook, you'll be standing behind Jayson Tatum, at a courtside seat. It's the weirdest phenomenon. I would suggest that everyone goes to an EYBL event at some point in their lives just because the vibe of it is just so fascinating.
That sounds awesome. The only thing I can compare that to is when Durant showed up at Hoop Summit last year. There was kind of that same buzz, but of course Jay-Z is kind of a different level just because, who the hell's ever seen Jay-Z in person before? So that's pretty incredible. So yeah,
Jay-Z was there because his nephew, I believe his name is Nazia Carter or something like that. He's actually really good. He plays for Albany, the City Rocks team from Albany, on the same team as Jim Boeheim's son, Buddy. Both of them are actually really good. I was shocked that Jim Boeheim's son was as good as he is. And it's Nazia Carter. He threw down, apparently, the most monstrous dunk on Marvin Bagley today that I saw a video of online. It's just insane. So yeah, I guess that he was there, saw his nephew play, took photos with the team, and then bounced. We were watching Marvin Bagley, like I said at the time, and Mike and Julian Applebaum, the other guy from Draft Express now, and I were walking out to just go get dinner because you're in that gym for 15 hours, and at some point you need to step out and just reacquaint yourself with humanity. And we look out and there's this massive Escalade. It was almost it wasn't a limo Escalade, but it was a stretched out Escalade, waiting right in front. And we're just oh, wonder who that's for.
That's so great.
Very clearly Jay-Z about to get into this, I guess it was a 4-door Escalade, maybe a 6-door Escalade. So that was our experience yesterday at the Nike EYBL event in Thousand Oaks in Los Angeles. Really good event. Like I said, I would suggest everyone goes to an EYBL event at some point in their lives because it's just the most fascinating thing you will ever come across in your life.
So you said that Marvin Bagley looked pretty improved. I saw him at Les Schwab in December, and he played against Michael Porter. Insane athlete. I didn't see too much of the perimeter game. Did he show any of that?
Yeah, he did. So for people who don't know who Marvin Bagley is, because, you know, I feel like people don't really start paying attention. Like, I mean, the general public, right? Like recruiting Knicks and people like that, they will always be in tune with sophomores and juniors and stuff. But, you know, Marvin Bagley is the best junior high school basketball player in the country right now. He'll be a senior next year. So he is a 6'11" kid. Average length, like not anything crazy. He probably has like a 7'1" wingspan, 7'2" wingspan. Freak athlete, freak fluidity, head above the rim, explosiveness, super quick, can, you know, rip and run with the ball in his hands and run the court and, you know, finish in transition. He can shoot a little bit from three. He's still probably like a 30% 3-point shooter. Like he's not a good 3-point shooter, but he can shoot. And, you know, he can hit shots from the mid-range. And the best part about him is that he's on a team called the Family, the Nike Family, in EYBL, but that before yesterday was winless in EYBL. He doesn't care. That dude just gives a shit and plays as hard as humanly possible, like basically the entire game. And when you're that athletic and that skilled and everything, it manifests itself in dropping 30-point, 20-rebound games regularly. And he's just unbelievable. In my opinion, he is the best prospect in all of high school basketball. He is better than anyone in the 2017 class, including Michael Porter. He is better than anyone in the 2019 class, which right now includes R.J. Barrett, although that might be subject to change if you hear some of the rumors out there about Barrett potentially reclassifying to 2018. So, yeah, I mean, Marvin Bagley is going to be unbelievable. He is going to be a 2019 draftee. You know, right now, I would be surprised if you told me in 2 years he is not the first overall pick.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience scouting these lower level guys very far back, but I stood behind the basket underneath the rim and just watched him jump. And I've never seen somebody jump so easily, just from a standstill. That guy can get above the rim with ease.
Yep.
The only thing I question is like what position he's going to play at the next level. Is he a 4? Is he a 5? He looks more like a 4 to me. But that's the only thing I couldn't figure out. But overall, I mean, the athletic package, the skill package, as far as what he could do, baseline skills, pass, dribble a little bit, shoot from the mid-range. He had a couple shots over Michael Porter in that game they played in Les Schwab. So, yeah, really alluring package for sure. He definitely seems like he's worth the hype he's getting.
Yeah, like he is. I think he's probably a 5 in the NBA. Like he's 6'11" now. Like that's big enough to play the 5 in the NBA, especially in the modern NBA. And he does a really good job of making sure that he contests shots at least. Like he's not super long. Like I said, he probably has like a 7'1", 7'2" wingspan. But the fact that he contests everything at that sort of athleticism, I think is going to allow him to play a, you know, competent center is probably the way to put it.
Yeah, to me, he looked like he would start at the 4 and then be someone you kick over to the 5. I'm not sure. His frame didn't look super developed as far as like super wide shoulders or anything like that. And you mentioned the length. The games I saw him play in high school, he was a pretty decent rim protector. Like he tried. It's just like you said, the length wasn't there to contest a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, the skill package is definitely there, and the athleticism is absurd. Yeah,
and then the other guy that I saw over the weekend that kind of stuck with me was Cam Reddish from Philadelphia. He is one of the most difficult to assess prospects I've ever come across, really. 6'8", 6'9", over 200 pounds now. Like, his frame is freaky and his athleticism at that size is freaky. More in the Jayson Tatum mold of smoother athlete and fluid athlete than explosive, but he's also more explosive than Tatum is. The problem with Reddish is that I don't think I've ever seen an elite player that like wing position and point forward position where you can genuinely just dominate the ball and dominate the game. I've never seen one of those players be more apathetic on the floor than he is. Like you would hear things about like, Brandon Ingram wouldn't take over games at that age, and, other players wouldn't take over games. But with Reddish, it was different because he just didn't, it was more out of not caring than, an underdeveloped skill set, because this kid can get to the rim whenever he wants. He can shoot threes. He can really be a nuisance defensively. I would say that 60 to 70% of transition plays, he doesn't cross the half court in transition defense. Like, just walks up and down the floor. It's disappointing in a lot of ways because, for probably, he played how many minutes yesterday? 32 times 2, 64 minutes. I would say he cared, or looked like he cared on the basketball floor. I'm not going to pretend like I know what's in his mind, but in terms of his body language and in terms of everything like that, he looked like he cared for probably 50 or 15 of those minutes, and didn't care for 50 of them. So in those 15 minutes, he is just the most incredible wing prospect. I've seen Zion Williamson before. Cam Reddish's ceiling is higher than Zion Williamson's, I think. I don't really think it's close, to be honest, because what Reddish can do is he has positional size to play the 4. He is capable in terms of a skill set, not reliant on athleticism, of getting to the rim. He can knock down shots from 25, 23 feet. His first step is really, really good. When he really wants to just blow by a guy, he can absolutely get by the guy. He has above the rim athleticism, not insanely, but he can finish pretty solidly above the rim. And he has all of the frame and length. He's gonna be 6'9", 225 pounds with ease by the time he is, or if he just works on his body. This kid he has all of the talent in the world. He is, to me, the only person who could challenge Marvin Bagley for the number 1 overall pick that year. And I see no reason to expect it right now, given what I saw on Saturday.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thought back. I don't think I have seen him before, but if he's more talented than Zion Williamson, who I did see at Adidas Nations, that's pretty impressive, because that's someone who every time you'd be watching a different game and you just look over and everybody would just be going crazy every other play, because all he does is make highlight plays. So,
right,
what you've described, this guy sounds super alluring.
But with Zion, it's all the highlight plays, right? When I saw him, I don't know how his game translates to the college level. He's a 6'6" power forward with a 6'10" wingspan, and he can't shoot from outside of 14 feet. Right now, he's just stronger and considerably more athletic than everyone. That won't really be the case. He'll still be more athletic than everyone in college basketball, but I think there are some translation concerns in terms of his game. With Reddish, there are no such concerns in terms of translation-wise with his skill set. He is just freaky athletic at that size in terms of fluidity. With Zion, it's power, it's fluidity, it's everything, but he doesn't have the skill set yet, right?
Yeah, Zion, I don't know what the hell he is as an NBA guy, but in college you have to think that guy's just going to physically dominate people no matter what position he plays at, because he's just so athletically gifted. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can add. I haven't seen too many of these guys yet, but just a little bit.
Yeah, no, and Romeo Langford, I didn't get to see him this weekend either, but he's another guy that is a really impressive scorer. He's a scoring 6'5", 6'6" wing. 2 guard, can maybe play a little bit of 3. He's really polished, really poised. Will be able to score the basketball in pretty much whatever setting you put him in. But you look at a guy with the upside of a guy like Cam Reddish, and it would be hard for me to say that he is not the second most talented player in the 2018 class, at least.
That makes sense. I've seen Langford a couple games in high school, and that guy has ridiculous range. He's a budgeting skill set. He can get into the lane pretty much when he wants to. That guy was hitting 30-footers off the catch coming off screens in the games I saw, and he was the tallest guy in his team. He was playing center on his team or something like that. So that was kind of bizarre. Yeah,
no, he's really, really good. I think that I would honestly have him ahead of Zion Williamson too. But there are limitations in what he can do, in terms of the rest of his game. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens with all these guys. They're all so young. We're going to see them, coming up this summer at events like out in Las Vegas, and some of them will be at Peach Jam and everything. So we'll see. These things change throughout the course of their lives, and there's certainly more than enough time for Cam Reddish to, start to flourish and really start to, give the effort, because, 17-year-old kids are 17-year-old kids, right? Like, they're not what they are, in 2 months as compared to what they are now.
Yeah, I'm just excited to watch tape on him now. You got me excited here.
He's really interesting. So let's move on here. Let's talk about guys in the 2017 draft. We're getting way ahead of ourselves in the 2019 iteration. So let's talk about 2017. Today we are going to talk about Markelle Fultz, Jayson Tatum, Josh Jackson, Lonzo Ball, and Jonathan Isaac. So the way that I have broken this down is that, for me at least, I have Markelle Fultz in a tier by himself. I have Jayson Tatum, Josh Jackson, and Lonzo Ball in a tier. And then my third tier is Jonathan Isaac and all of the guys that we talked about last Monday, 6 through 10. How does that kind of compare to where you are?
I mean, right now, the only thing I have decided is Markelle in his own tier. My second tier is 6 guys right now. Basically, everybody we talked about and everybody you're going to talk about today, plus Malik Monk. So, I mean, I'm pretty much on the same page. I think you can go a lot of different ways after pick number 1. That's the only real – Markelle's the only guy in this class where I look at and I'm like, this is the obvious number 1 talent. Everybody else you can kind of make a claim for. I have Dennis Smith number 2, so we differ a little bit there. He's the only other guy I have in the top 7 that you probably don't have, or I think you don't have, right? Or maybe number 6.
I have him at 7 right now, so yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm a little higher on him, but I'm pretty much with any kind of order anybody has after number 1.
Yep. So let's kind of just move into the guy that – both of us believe is very clearly in a tier by himself. It's Markelle Fultz. In terms of his offensive game, let's just kind of start there. He is unbelievable in the pick and roll. He is unbelievable in terms of getting into the lane whenever he wants. He has better body control than really, any player that I can really remember at that level, especially when driving to the lane and finishing at the rim. Not necessarily an elite explosiveness athlete. He's not going to be a guy that, is going to finish 7 inches above the rim, like Zion Williamson, like we just talked about. But he is a guy that, can rise up and dunk when necessary. He's a better athlete, for instance, than a guy that he often gets compared with in D'Angelo Russell. I think that that's kind of the separating factor between the two of them. In terms of his scoring ability, he's an all 3 level scorer. He can, come off of screens and knock down threes off the catch. He can come off of ball screens and knock down threes when coming around, brushing right off of his screener's shoulder. Once he gets into the lane, he has a jump shot with a lot of utility in that he is able to pull up from any spot on the floor and the shot has a reasonable chance of going in. Has a pretty good floater game, probably not as well developed necessarily as a De'Aaron Fox or a Jawun Evans, but it's a good floater game that he will continue to grow into, I think. And then, like I said, at the rim, just insane body control. One aspect of his game that I think has gone underrated is his passing ability, and that's where I will hand it off to you, Cole, because I know that you believe this as well.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think his vision is actually really good. You've seen that in the lower levels, like U18s when he played there. It comes across maybe not as assists because Washington doesn't finish them. So you watch the finishing possessions on Synergy. Sometimes those passes don't pop up. But when you just watch his overall acumen, his vision, he can keep his head up while dribbling, and his advanced handle is really, I think, one of his best gifts. I mean, he has such a unique style. He plays off really wide hang dribbles, hesitation moves. He has so many dribble moves to get into the lane. If you compare his spin move to Lonzo Ball's, it's unreal, the difference as far as I totally agree with you as far as his explosiveness isn't elite, but he makes up for it with flexibility, craft, all that stuff. He's just a really, really unique style of player, and he's kind of awkward. And we've seen that kind of player translates pretty well as far as just having a certain pace to your game. And yeah, the vision stuff, I have no issues with him there. Maybe the decision making at times, he does settle for 2-point jump shots a lot. You can put some of that on his teammates as far as spacing goes, playing with 2 traditional bigs a lot. But yeah, he has some things to iron out when it comes to pick and roll decision making. But his vision, I think, is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think that the key word here is he's creative. Like he, as a player, this kid is unbelievably creative. I remember seeing him at Hoop Summit last year. I guess that was. It would be the 2016 Hoop Summit, and he would just like randomly try these, runners from 40 feet away just to see if he could make them. And I would ask him about it after, and he's like, yeah, you never know when you're going to have to, do something like this, like at the end of a game or something. And I just kind of want to have it in my toolbox just in case. Like his brain kind of works at a different wavelength as compared to other players in that way. Like he's not Lonzo Ball, who sees plays 3 plays before they happen, but he does think of basketball in a similarly creative manner as the game refers to the way that he handles the ball and handles his distribution in terms of teammates. Yeah. Again, you mentioned that, Washington guys didn't really finish his looks. They shot something like 31% from 3 if you take away his 3-point attempts this year. Whenever you have that kind of spacing on the floor, it's incredibly difficult to even come close to having, the ability to rack up assist numbers, essentially. And the fact that I think he averaged, 5.9 assists per game or something like that is unbelievable to me, given what he had on that roster. And I know that they obviously played at an extremely high tempo, but nonetheless, it's just remarkably impressive to me that he has the most complete offensive game of any guard that I can remember entering the draft, at least. Can you remember someone that has a similarly complete game?
I don't really. I mean, Kyrie Irving, I don't remember him too much at the time. I mean, he had that small sample where he was like elite efficiency at everything. Maybe he was a touch better as a scorer, but I feel like Markelle's vision was better than Kyrie's. And I know that's somewhat of a hindsight bias because we know that Kyrie didn't materialize as like a creative passer. But I just felt like at the time, Markelle had that ability. He had the functional athleticism, the vision to like Markelle can like do a spin move and keep his head up and then like throw a wraparound pass around a big. Like you just don't see that from an 18-year-old very often. Like you said, very, very crafty, and overall, yeah, he can hit that game-changing 3, and he kind of works his way in. He can pull up off the dribble going either direction, pull up on a dime, and then he can get to the rim, insane body control, really good hip flexibility. So, yeah, I mean, as a 3-level scorer who can also pass, which is what you want in a modern NBA lead guard, he's the total package.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable, and you see that, from photos online and everything, that he's very much a late bloomer physically. He's going to continue to get stronger and stronger as, he continues to just mature into his body. The story's been told many, many times that he, did not make his varsity team at was it DeMatha, right? He played at DeMatha, I think.
Yes.
Right? He didn't make the varsity team at DeMatha until his junior season. And, 6'4" now, 6'10" wingspan, probably over 200 pounds now. Played this entire season at slightly under a year younger than what most freshman guards are, or most freshmen are within college basketball. So there's just nothing to me to, be worried about with him on offense. Like he is going to be like, the worst case scenario for him, in my opinion, is that he is like a top 20 offensive player in the NBA at some point, which is insane in terms of like worst case scenario.
I agree. I mean, there's just so much there to his game. He has so much diversity. He has so much craft. I don't know how he really fails on the offensive end.
Yeah, no, it's like he even draws fouls. He drew 6.2 fouls per 40 minutes this season. Like it's just, it's fascinating and remarkable. And, the fact that this kid, like I said, did not play varsity his junior year, like maybe that's on the coaching staff, but it really does kind of go to show what the meteoric rise of, his stock has been. Let's kind of talk about the defensive end real quick. He was a disaster defensively this year. Let's just kind of call it out for what it was. Having said that, I think it's also pretty fair to say that Washington as a whole was just a total mess. They were not good defensively, and I don't really know what to do with him on that end because he does have really good lateral quickness. He's 6'4" with like a 6'10" wingspan. There's a lot to think that he's going to be fine in terms of his defense, at least in terms of not being a sieve on that end. But, you look at a guy like James Harden. James Harden has never really come along in terms of effort and in terms of being being someone that you can count on to not fuck up defensively. So, where are you with Markelle Fultz? Do we think it's more of a mentality thing, or do we think it's just going to be a scenario where he gets into the NBA, gets into a situation in Boston in all likelihood where they're playing for the playoffs immediately and everything's fine?
I just think the most promising thing about him is his physical tools defensively. Like, he's not going to be like a target. He's not going to be headhunted in the playoffs, right? He's not small enough to where teams are going to scheme against him and attack him like they attack Isaiah Thomas, like they attack Jeff Teague. He's big. He's going to be able to anchor himself in the post and at least be okay there. I think he's a little bit of a long strider. He's okay laterally. It's hard to know because he barely got down in his stance this year and actually slid. I think UW played zone like 30% of the time, I want to say. And like 2-3 zone was just notoriously horrible. Like, we saw that with Marquise Chris, who was a disaster defensively, but like that didn't benefit him at all either. So there's some tools to work with at the very least. I don't think he's going to be a liability on that end, but I really don't know what his defensive capabilities are because I've never really seen it. U18s, he was actually pretty good as far as getting steals, exerting high effort. So maybe with his role was reduced, he didn't have that like 31% usage on UW. Maybe if his role is more like he's going to exert more energy on both ends, he can be okay there. But at his optimal use, you brought up James Harden. I mean, these lead guards that have to like direct the offense and stuff, they're not going to give you high level defense. I mean, basically nobody does except for Chris Paul. So I'm fine with that as long as he's not going to be like a Damian Lillard type liability. And I think that's very much on the table. I think he can easily be better than that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And plus, like you said, you look at some of the instinctual stuff. He can get into passing lanes. He has really good timing on transition chase downs, which, portends well, I think, for maybe him being maybe a little bit better of a weak side rim protector than you tend to see from most guards. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be like Dwayne Wade in terms of a shot blocking guard, but, he could maybe at least provide, what do we even want to say? Maybe not one block a game, but maybe like 0.7 blocks a game or something like that. Like, it would not be crazy to me to see him, be a solid usage player on that side of the floor. So, I guess that, my next question here is, we think there's zero chance that Boston goes anywhere else, right?
Yeah, I don't see how they can. I mean, they have to take the best talent, and I just don't see an argument for anybody else in this class over Fultz as far as best talent goes.
So in that regard, how do we think that he would fit playing with Isaiah Thomas?
I mean, they can't both play together short term if you want to win in the same backcourt. I mean, they're going to get toasted defensively. There's just no way around that because Markelle, even if he is like optimally good at defense his first year, rookies are never good. So if you pair him with Isaiah, it's just no chance they're going to survive that. But, I mean, they have to look at it more long-term than that. You can't just have the short-term mindset of, we have to direct our backcourt to be more defensive-minded. Markelle, even if he comes off the bench, just giving him some kind of creator role. Like we talked about last time with Isaiah, like sitting against the Cavs. The Cavs are just switching everything. Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart can't create in isolation. And now you have somebody like probably the best guard we've seen in a long time at being able to create in the situation. So you got to roll with that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, we saw him play off ball a little bit at Washington this year, too, with David Crisp taking over at point guard. I think he's probably going to be able to do that occasionally next to Isaiah Thomas. If you want to put the ball in Isaiah's hands, Markelle can run off of screens, and he's a good catch-and-shoot player. If you want to put the ball in Markelle's hands, Isaiah has shown himself of playing capably off ball next to Marcus Smart. So I think on offense, they're going to be fine. Like you said, defensively, it's a little bit more concerning because neither of them have shown themselves to be adequate defenders at this stage. The good thing, though, is for Boston that they have two of the most elite defenders in the backcourt in the entire NBA in Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart, and they can kind of pair off and even, maybe occasionally play a smaller lineup with Marcus Smart at the 3 and Fultz and Isaiah Thomas at the 1 and 2 and kind of let Marcus maybe take on some tougher assignments and see if you can find a way to hide Isaiah, even though in today's NBA it's really hard to hide him because teams just find him and, locate him and switch on and get their best players switched on to him.
Definitely. And I think just the overall, like the underlying fact of the entire thing is you take Markelle and you figure it out. Like he's the one talent in this draft where I'm not even concerned about fit. You just take him, you figure out in the future as far as building around him. And he's the one guy that I can really say confidently that you do that for in this class.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like I said, very clear number one on my board this year. I got asked, how would I rate him compared to, Michael Porter and past number one overall picks? I would probably at this stage take him over Porter. 2016, who went number one in 2016? Ben Simmons. I would take Fultz over Ben Simmons probably. Would you take Fultz or Wiggins? You weren't a Wiggins number one guy, were you? You were an Embiid guy.
No, correct.
So
yeah, I would definitely take Fultz over Wiggins.
Would you take Fultz over Embiid?
No. I was really, really high on Embiid, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's understandable why someone would be high on Embiid. Yeah. I mean, taking away... I would take Fultz over Embiid just because I like certainty. I don't want my number one overall pick to be, have the potential for injury. But nonetheless, I understand why someone would take Embiid if they, got the right medical reports back.
Yeah, I think for me, we had this conversation actually early on our podcast, and we said Anthony Davis probably ahead of Fultz, Karl Towns ahead of Fultz, and then really for me it becomes arguable. I think Ben Simmons and Fultz is really close. I think Simmons might have a little bit higher upside, but Fultz has the higher floor, the shooting certainty, or not certainty, but more likelihood than shooting than Simmons did. So it's really interesting.
Here's the thing with that, though. It's way easier to build a team around Markelle Fultz than it is around Ben Simmons.
Oh, sure, but if Simmons hits, he's the kind of guy you want to build around, that kind of 4 primary initiator type. Like, if he's who we think he is, like, he's going to be worth it, but there is more risk. That's why I think Fultz is a safer bet to build around.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. All right, let's move on to some of the more interesting, I guess, prospects. Because to me, I don't want to say that Markelle isn't interesting, but some of the, conversation around him isn't as interesting to me just because we know he's really fucking good. And what else do we need to say, right? Like, do you kind of feel that way?
Well, nobody ever talks about him because there's nothing really to say anymore. Everybody talks about 2 through 7, 2 through 8, because everybody assumes one is Markelle, and everybody's moved on from that point. So, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So let's talk about Jayson Tatum, who I have at number 2 on my board. I feel like that is a little bit divergent from what the rest of, the basketball community thinks. Do you think that's probably right?
A little bit higher. Yeah, I mean, I've seen him. He's pretty much, I think 2 is the highest I've seen him ranked in general. I think maybe one other guy has him 2. Lowest I've seen is 7. So anything in that 2 to 7 range, that whole tier, is a fair argument for me. I get the allure of him, but I also get some of the downside arguments.
Yeah, no, I think that the downside arguments are totally fair, and we'll talk about that in a second. But, the reason that I am high on Jayson Tatum is twofold, right? I think that Tatum is probably the best wing scorer in this draft. I'm not really breaking ground there, right?
No, you're not breaking ground at all.
Okay. So you put that with the fact that it's incredibly difficult to find wing scoring right now. Would you say that beyond star player, finding scoring on the wing that can tangibly defend is probably the second hardest thing to find, right?
I think, yeah, you hit on the key there as far as two-way play. If you can find a two-way wing who can score, that's huge.
Right, and I'm not saying we'll get to that in a second too. I'm not saying that Jayson Tatum is like an all-world defender either. You put that in conjunction with the fact that he plays a very scarce position, with the fact that he is elite in terms of intangibles, in terms of work ethic, someone that you want on your team, good teammate, good kid, never has gotten in trouble off the floor, never has had any sort of issues like that, come up at this stage, just I trust him to get the absolute most out of his abilities. And where his abilities are right now is potential 25 point per game scorer in the NBA to me. Like, he can do everything in terms of creating his own shot. And if you can do that in the NBA, or you can do that in college at that age, it tends to portend well to being able to do it in the NBA.
See, the most alluring part of his game for me is that he's so good at so many things. Like, he's not like these traditional wings who come in, they're not that polished. Like, he's polished footwork. He can get to his jump shot off the dribble. He has good shake out of triple threat. And he's a decent enough passer where I think he can improve there. Like, his baseline and so many skills is so high that you just don't see that from that kind of player. He has pretty decent feel. I don't think he's like an elite feel guy, but he's pretty good there. But that also works against him as far as, did you have any one elite skill? Maybe, like, some people say the scoring's going to translate in elite fashion. I'm not sure if it will. Like, his finishing at the rim, we've talked about this in the past, kind of troubles me. The lack of explosion. Is he going to do well against superior athletes? This is somebody who, every time I've seen him against Josh Jackson, I don't know if you can vouch for this as well, on lower levels, Josh has gotten the better of him as far as defending him.
Josh has gotten the better of every single goddamn player on youth levels, because Josh is, as we'll talk about in a second, like, just the most hyper-competitive human being you'll ever see, and he takes it upon himself to dominate elite competition whenever, like, he's up against it. So I would say that is totally accurate, that Josh Jackson has gotten the better of Jayson Tatum. He's gotten the better of, every elite prospect that he's come across.
Yeah, what I don't like about the Tatum narrative is, like, the whole isolation scorer. Like, he's this mid-range guy who can't be anything else. I think his ancillary skills are actually pretty good. Like, he can pass well enough. His three-point shots, like, it's not like a bad bet to shoot threes. He's okay. Like, I'm not sure he's going to be like a knockdown three-point shooter, but he's a pretty good projection when you factor in free throw percentage, just form. I mean, his form's not the most fluid thing. Like, that's the thing that loses me with the Carmelo Anthony comparisons. If you watch Carmelo shoot in college, he was insane as far as fluidity-wise. Tatum isn't that, but he's got enough diversity to where I feel like he can score at multiple levels. The question with me is going to be degree. That's the question with me with Tatum entirely. I know he's got a wide array of skills, and he contributes across the board. It's just about degree. How effective and how efficient is he going to be as a scorer? So,
like, one thing that you always talk about with DeMar DeRozan, and it's why you and I have disagreed on how valuable DeRozan is you don't think that DeRozan brings enough in terms of other skills, right? Like,
correct.
You don't think he's a good enough passer. He's obviously not a good enough defender. I think the passing's a little bit underrated. But, in terms of being a good enough defender, in terms of, bringing anything to the table on the glass, DeRozan doesn't necessarily bring that. I think Tatum probably will bring, a higher level of floor game, as Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue call it, than DeRozan has. I would say that at his age and as a NBA draft prospect, Jayson Tatum is elite in terms of creating his own shot. The question is finishing that shot, right? Like, you bring up the idea of efficiency, and, the key for him is going to be getting to the point where he is a high-level jump shooter. If he can become a high-level jump shooter, he is going to average 25 points a game. I have zero doubt about that. The question is he going to get there in terms of the way that his shot mechanics work? Like you said, it's not a funky jumper. Like, it looks fine. It's gotten seemingly more fluid, I guess, in the offseason. There was that video floating around of him making 15 threes in a row. Whatever to me. Like, I think that those workouts are very staged, but nonetheless they have, slight value because they can kind of show what a player is working on at the very least. And it did seem that he ironed out, like, I don't want to say he had a hitch in his jump shot, but it was kind of like a two-step jump shot, right? Like, where he would get set, bring it up, and then catapult it. He seems to have ironed out that, like, second, the area between the second and third step, right? And I think that really will help him as he continues to, move into the ability to become a better jump shooter on the NBA level.
Yeah, if he can do that, it's going to be the jump shooting, because he's going to struggle, I think, to finish around the rim a little bit with the lack of flexibility, the lack of explosion. So if he gets that jump shot to where he can be like a triple threat as far as catching the ball, creating some shake, and then getting enough space to get that shot off, and if he can be elite at that, and if he can play in a team construct to where he can shoot threes, he doesn't have to be this like catch and hold guy. I don't think he has to be. I think that's a narrative. He's skilled enough to where it's not like you're not going to like throw him the ball in the mid post in every possession and have him create. That's not who he has to be.
Right.
So
he's just capable of that.
Exactly, and I think you want that as like a fallback option in offense. You don't want it as like your first or second option, but we know that you need shot creation to win at a high level. And if he can do that efficiently, he becomes supremely valuable. It's just I don't know what the degree of that is.
Yeah, no, ultimately a lot of this comes back to me trusting the kid, Like I said, like I think that, I have not come across anyone that's had anything, super negative to say about him. Like, you occasionally hear the word soft thrown around, like the fact that he might not be like this, crazy, competitive person that, will want to just end the worlds in the NBA, but whatever. I don't think you need that to be an elite NBA player either.
How much do you think he can play the 4 at the next level? Because I think that's really that's important.
Situationally, for sure.
Okay.
I think that, he's going to be able to play, like 10 minutes a game, 12 minutes a game at the 4. You can especially do it against bench units, I think. Or like, maybe you can like steal some minutes there. But like, I don't think, maybe he can play the 3, and as his body fills out, he can play the 4. We'll see how the body fills out, though. He has good shoulders. There's no reason to think that, he can't get his... I mean, he probably doesn't want to get as thick as Carmelo Anthony, but like, I've seen like a Danny Granger comp floated around.
Yep.
I think he can probably get that big, right?
He's got a good baseline. I mean, he's pretty big right now. He looks like he can physically develop easily. Yeah. If you compare his frame to Josh Jackson's, I don't think it's really close. Tatum just looks a much bigger upper body build. He's got that girth and that core strength. So, I mean, he's a pretty decent rebounder. He's not like elite, but he's pretty good.
He's a good rebounder, I thought, yeah.
Yeah, if he can hold his own on the glass, I think that he could be a valuable piece at the 4 spot, and that's when you really get that utility from him. If he can like catch and like face up against these like more traditional 4s, they're not going to be able to stay with him. So that's the value for me. Can he do that as well on top of the shooting?
I guess the question is like, how much is the 4 position just going to continue to move toward being a de facto 3, right? Like if that ends up being the case, then that kind of like positional value is taken away, right?
That's true, especially in the playoffs. I think regular season, you probably won't see that trend too much, but the playoffs, yeah, we've seen the downsizing and really 3s or 4s. The conventional 4 is being played out of the league.
Yeah, no, I think it kind of is in a way in terms of like the way that you end up closing games. It's definitely being trended out of the league. Just generally, you want to play as big as possible and athletic as possible, and if you have to go one way or the other, it probably makes more sense to play athletic while sacrificing a couple of inches in terms of size.
Agreed.
So Tatum, let's kind of talk about the downside real quick. Is we've kind of noted throughout, ultimately it's going to come down to efficiency. Is he going to be able to become a good enough shooter from everywhere, from the mid-range to the three-point line to around the rim? One thing with him around the rim that I notice is that I think he takes off from too far away from the rim, typically. I think that that's adjustable, and I think that maybe he might be able to gain a little bit more vertical explosiveness if he takes off closer to the basket, as opposed to like trying to take these long strides. He's a long strider and long jumper more than he's like a high jumper and like short choppy guy. So I think that if you can maybe work on him mechanically to get him to take off a little bit closer to the basket, he might get a little bit more bounce vertically. But having said that, I mean, he's still just going to be a guy that is probably never going to be like an elite finisher at the rim.
Yeah, I mean, not to parallel Carmelo again, but Carmelo, that's something he's always struggled with, because even though he has the frame to kind of dislodge guys, he can't really explode in traffic, especially. So I definitely agree with your point as far as like getting closer to the rim. He has some craft. Like, he has some pretty impressive finishes this year where he has use some body control, kind of go up and under. You don't see a ton of that, but if he explodes closer to the rim, maybe that gets enhanced a little bit. But yeah, I don't ever see him being an elite finisher, but he'd at least be respectable. Yeah,
and I think that that's all you're going for, really. Where do you have him on your board? I don't think that you have said yet.
I haven't fixated him. He's like I said, he's probably somewhere between 3 and 7 right now. I got to iron that out. He's behind Fultz and Dennis Smith for me for sure. I don't know where he's going to fall 3 to 7, but he's not going to fall any farther than 7.
Is there a team in the top 7 that you think really makes sense for him?
See, that's the weirdest thing about him, because I feel like he fits kind of everywhere. He's not like somebody I'm going to pigeonhole into a specific team. That's kind of, I think that's probably one of your arguments for him, is that he's so versatile, and like for team building purposes, you can build around him. So when I look at the teams in there, I don't know. I mean, Philadelphia would be interesting just because he would probably force opposing teams to play Simmons with their four, which is optimal. So Simmons could create against fours, and you're not going to play fours against Tatum. He's too skilled for that. So that's interesting. I'm not sure if they go that way. But, yeah, I mean, Orlando was another team potentially that makes some sense next to Aaron Gordon. But he's kind of similar, but that's kind of the similar argument, I guess I would say.
I mean, do you want to play with 2 balls in Philadelphia if they take him? Like, there's not nearly enough ball for Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Jayson Tatum, I feel like.
That's fair. I mean, that's kind of the similar argument, though, if they take, like, Dennis Smith, too, right? I mean, there's only 1 ball to go around. You got a bunch of high-usage guys. Are they going to take Malik Monk and play, like, just 2 primaries and then that high-level secondary? That's a good argument. Yeah,
like, honestly, I think that they should try and move down and take Malik Monk. Like, and just kind of accumulate more assets and take the guy that fits what they do or fits what they could potentially do best. But we'll see if that happens anyway. The Lakers I've talked about before. I talked about it specifically on the Lakers Nation podcast with Trevor Lane. I love that fit next to Brandon Ingram. I think that, he could be a creator, whereas Brandon Ingram would cover up for a lot of his length deficiencies, would cover up for a lot of his, Tatum would be able to maybe cover up for some of the strength deficiencies while Ingram's continuing to grow. Ingram is a really, really instinctive passer, really smart defender. Tatum would be able to take on all of the shot creation abilities late in the shot clock and kind of let Ingram just wreak havoc a little bit with his length and athleticism. And, Ingram had some pretty sweet tip dunks this year in large part because he was just able to attack the glass and utilize his length. And, in space, the athleticism isn't as crazy a concern for him if you don't have to rely on him to create out of a standstill.
That's really interesting. Would you play them at the 2 and the 3, or would you think more of the 4, and what are you doing with Randall there?
I would play them 3, 4, 5. I think that it's obviously a problem with Julius Randle that he is not going to ever be a rim protector, but that defensive lineup is just going to switch everything. And maybe you can try and cut off penetration to the rim more so like marginally than other teams, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just getting at the point, like, they still don't really have a point of attack defender, but if you're just going to switch everything and be ultra switching, even at your 5 spot with Randall, which is like, that's his one defensive skill, is that guy can switch and slide with pretty much anybody. Yeah. I don't think he's really useful in any other defensive setting, but if you're going to straight switch, and I think that's what Luke Walton wants to do, I can see some credence to that. Yeah.
I don't think they're going to take Jayson Tatum, obviously, but I like the idea of the fit there. Phoenix, I think that the fit would be fine there. They really need a wing, obviously. Sacramento, he could take right over for Rudy Gay. That's what a lot of people kind of think of his downside as, but, I think that he's going to be a little bit better than Rudy. Orlando, like you said, would be a really good fit next to Aaron Gordon. Again, I think that very similar to Los Angeles, you would have a situation where Aaron could just focus on wreaking havoc offensively and on the glass and with his athleticism and let Jayson create out of a standstill, right? And then Minnesota, I'm less enthused about in a lot of ways.
Oh, boy.
Just because, again, I don't know that there's enough ball for the front court guys there.
Yeah, that's the worst fit for me, pretty obviously. I mean, that's the Isaac fit, the clear, like, ancillary skills Isaac can bring to that lineup. Tatum would I think he would just expand the problem there. Not to his fault. It's just they have so many guys that need the ball, and, yeah, they need more defense for sure.
Yeah, like, that offense randomly gets super ball stoppy anyway. And like that would just exacerbate so many of the things that we talk about as false narratives in a lot of ways for Tatum, in that he can never be this non-ball stopper. If he went to Minnesota, he would probably become like this ball stopping forward that we don't really want.
So what do you think about the defense?
I think he is going to be a switchable defender who can probably guard 2 through 4. Not like super high level on 2s necessarily, but if he gets stuck on them in a pinch, I don't think that it's going to be the worst thing in the world. I think that he is pretty solid in terms of reading passing lanes and getting out into transition. He's obviously a guy that, like we've said, is a good rebounder, and when he gets rebounds, he can rip and run up the floor in transition, carrying the ball. And as we've seen, I like that it's been talked about a little bit more this year, the advantage that you gain if a ball handler gets the rebound, because they can just rip and go on offense and try and get an advantage on the defense with more cutters kind of surrounding him and maybe getting to the basket a little bit easier. He's capable of that. And I don't think he's necessarily going to be a good one-on-one defender, and I don't think you're going to get much in terms of, ancillary weak side rim protection. But if you can, he's not going to be like a difference maker defensively, but I don't think he's going to be a negative defensively by any means either.
That's kind of my stance. I don't think he's going to be a liability. He's strong enough and he's quick enough. He's not great laterally because we talked about the hip flexibility and stuff. He just can't really sit down that well and move really explosively quickly.
Long strider too.
Yes. So I don't see him really as like any kind of lockdown impact defender. He's not going to be that. But I don't know, at the same time, he's not going to be like a liability. You're not going to try to attack him. That's not going to be like part of team scheme. So that has value in itself. I think instincts off ball are interesting as far as getting in passing lanes. He has pretty good instincts there. But, yeah, I mean, it comes down to the fact that you talk about a guy that has plus value offensively, at least ideally, and he's not going to be a negative defensively. I think that's kind of his calling card.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that ultimately where you come down on him is how much of a plus you think he's going to be offensively.
Yep.
If you think that he is going to be a 25-point-a-game scorer, like I think his ceiling portends to be, then you're probably super high on him. If you think he is going to struggle with efficiency, then that's obviously going to be a concern. Let's move on and talk about Josh Jackson. Would you say that Josh Jackson is maybe the most functional athlete in this draft class in terms of getting the most out of the highest level of athleticism?
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. You see it trickle down in so many elements of his game, attacking the glass, just his general, how hard he tries defensively. It translates onto the court in so many different ways. Like, he got compared to Andrew Wiggins a lot coming into here. I mean, he's more functionally athletic than Wiggins. Wiggins is a better run and jump athlete. I don't think it's even that close as far as explosiveness around the rim. Like, Wiggins is a freaky athlete. But you see Jackson, as far as like getting steals, getting blocks, getting rebounds, it just goes into so many different avenues and so many different aspects of his game in ways that it doesn't for most in this class.
Yeah, and ultimately I think that what it comes down to is that I have used this term for him, and I mean it, in many ways to be a positive. And really on the floor, I think it manifests itself as a full positive. That dude is a motherfucker on the floor, and that is a true scouting term. That dude is crazy, crazy competitive. And you see it trickle down to all aspects of his game, right? The way that he relentlessly attacks on offense, the way that, he's super wild defensively. Like, he's, constantly doubling guys and blitzing guys and, sitting down and really getting his hands up in guys' grill at the point of attack on offense. Like, it's crazy how competitive this guy is. And, it shows in the way that we kind of talked about. Like, he's gotten the better of all of these guys on the AAU circuit, on the EYBL circuit. He has just been unbelievable in terms of, the way that he was, dominant on the youth level just because of that athleticism and competitiveness combination. There are obviously some translation concerns to the NBA. We talked about frame at the top here, so let's kind of start there because he played the small ball 4 a lot this year at Kansas. He's not going to be able to do that in the NBA, I don't think. The shoulders are so narrow. The frame doesn't seem like it's going to take on a ton of weight naturally over the course of his career. Where are you at on just kind of his positional versatility and his just general frame? Because I think that right now that might be my biggest on the court concern.
I agree, actually. Like, his frame is adequate. It's fine. It's not great. He doesn't have that great length. He's 6'10" wingspan, so he's not great there either. He's pretty good laterally. I don't know if he's elite laterally. So he got a lot of Iguodala comparisons coming out of the gate. I think Iguodala is a more explosive athlete. He's stronger frame. So it's kind of not analogous that way. And he looks to me, he's kind of like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist as far as just being his biggest defensive asset is that he tries so hard, and that's kind of what makes MKG a really good defender. He's not great. He's a really good athlete. He's not great athletically. He doesn't have like great explosiveness and all that stuff. And his frame, he gets bullied by like the bigger wings. That's kind of how I see Jackson as far as his defensive impact. He's a plus, but I don't see like a generational defender there just because he doesn't have the physical tools to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The other thing that he does defensively that really bothers me is the constant like blitzing and the constant like leaving position to try and just make something happen defensively instead of playing like solid conservative defense. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I think Chris Stone touched on that a little bit because he watches all the Kansas games. He said that some of that scheme related. I remember one noticeable mistake where he left Malik Monk in the corner. I don't know if you see that, but like that was an egregious mistake. He doubled the post one pass away off the strong side corner, left Monk, and you're like, Jackson, what are you doing, man? But I think Chris Stone was like, yeah, this is like kind of incorporating their scheme. I'm not sure if it's every blunder that he's made. And, you know, he had to be rangy defensively because they didn't have really anything else. Landon Lucas was their center. Josh had to kind of fly around and like protect the rim from the weak side and be that rangy force. So I don't know how much of it is scheme and how much of it is just over aggressiveness. I guess I trust his instincts enough to where a coach could be like, just tone it down a little bit as far as, you know, going for all these loose balls and like trying to double when you're not supposed to. He doesn't seem like he's bad instinctually. Maybe it was scheme, maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's bad instinctually at all. I think he's actually an incredible read and react player. It's just he's over aggressive and does stupid shit. Like, it is what it is. That read and react kind of mentality, and this is something that I've written about before, it filters to his jump shot where he's very much a rhythm jump shooter, right? Like he has made shots throughout the course of his youth career, despite having mechanics that look just fucking awful.
It's weird for him because I feel like he is an instinctual athlete more than he is like a high IQ athlete, if that makes sense. Like his instincts, like on the court, he'll catch the ball and he'll just fire a pass to the corner, and like he won't even think about it. It's just a natural reaction. You just don't see that from many, especially wings. Like not a lot of wings come into the league who can do that as far as just catch the ball, immediately instinctually react to something. He's really good at that. But then again, that causes a little bit of concern for the fact that is this guy, can he actually be an NBA thinker? Can he make decisions on the move? It looks like he can because his instincts are so good, and that's a really fine line to walk. I'm not even sure how much you can attribute to either one, but he's a very, very instinctual athlete.
Yeah. And I think that like one place you can see that for sure is in the jump shot, because whenever he's in rhythm, like in the course of a game, you know, we saw him knock down shots this year. He was a shot maker. And then when you saw him go to the foul line, he shot like 50% from the foul line because he has to stand there at standstill. And then he has to kind of create his own rhythm almost, right? Like the play doesn't create the rhythm for him as it does in the run of play, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think you had that in one of your articles. Like you talked to a scout that said that very same thing as far as going to the line. I thought that was the best way it's been described all year. And that's something you notice with him. Like his free throw percentage is really bad, but he has to go there. He has no rhythm at all. He has to stand there and then throw it up. And it's like, that's not his game. I mean, his game is doing things on the move, catching the ball on the move, making quick instinctual decisions. And we see that manifest even off the dribble. He's not very fluid shooting off the dribble, and his stats aren't good there. But even at times, I feel like he's more comfortable doing that because it's just in the moment. Like he'll just pull up in the moment, and then it won't look good, but it'll go sometimes. And you're like, okay. But the shot, very, very instinctual. Will it translate to NBA 3? I don't know. He had a couple NBA 3s off the catch, like on the hop later in the year. It seemed like he ironed out that hitch a little bit. So that gives you some cause for promise, because really what you're looking at with him is, can he hit like a corner 3 at a decent level? If he can do that, he can be an impact player. Yeah,
like my thing is, and I think that you have said this before, he brings the ball back too far to his head, right? Like he brings the ball like all the way like close to his head, and then I think that kind of fucks with his like release point in a way, because whenever you have unnecessary movement kind of at the top of your shooting motion, it makes it more difficult to time just the the release point consistently of where you want to get your natural, release point, to get the right rotation on your shot, to get the right arc on your shot and everything. And then whenever you kind of pair that with the fact that early in the season, he did struggle with his rhythm in the lower half. That's why you saw the ugly numbers early on. He ironed out the rhythm in the lower half later in the season. And I think that really filtered to, the way that he just became used to the speed of the game and used to how much time he had to hit his shot. So I have concerns about just the general hitchiness and the general bring the ball back too close to his face and then trying to find the right release point constantly. I think that it's going to be tougher for him to do that consistently above the break in the NBA 3-point line.
Yep.
But again, he's just such a weird, like, he's made shots at every level. So it's hard for me to say, like, a guy that has made shots at every level is going to stop making shots, I guess. Like, I get, like, I am fully cognizant of the concerns, and I think they should be pointed out. But on another level, he's just a shot maker.
Yeah, I mean, you can delineate him from like a Justice Winslow who really had no mid-range game. I think he hit 2 pull-up jumpers in the mid-range his entire Duke career. Like, there was some telltale signs that was a flawed shooting kind of mechanically thing. Josh still has that 2-motion release. I don't have a ton of confidence in it, but he's just a weird guy where you think that, okay, he's going to win some on instinct, he's going to win some in the moment. It's not going to look great. That's kind of like the Lonzo argument, right? A lot of things that Lonzo doesn't look great, but it's effective. And maybe Josh gets to that point, but it's hard for me with how many negative indicators there are to project him to be like a plus 3-point shooter, which he's probably going to need to be. I don't know what you feel about his ideal offensive role. Like, for me, he's more of like a secondary handler type. I love him attacking closeouts. I think he, against a bent defense, I feel like he could be awesome because he's so fearless, like you said, heading towards the rim. He can finish explosively there. He can make a simple read for sure. I mean, he's more qualified than that. That guy can pass on the move. And if you get him in those situations where you have to close out to him, I think he can be successful. The only problem is NBA defenders, for the most part, this is why I've soured on him some, because his primary creation upside is less than what I originally thought, because, I mean, you can play a foot and a half, 2 feet off that guy, and he's not going to be able to beat you. Like, even against Miles Bridges in the tournament, like, Miles Bridges was playing a foot and a half off, and Josh was hitting, like, step-back jumpers, but he couldn't beat Miles outside of that one closeout attack, off the dribble. And that's the way it's going to be in the NBA, I think. They're going to scheme for him a certain way, and can he actually create in the situations?
I know you were super high on Miles Bridges before he decided to return to Michigan State. Which one of those two guys do you like better?
Oh, man, that's so tough. I think watching Jackson back, when I watch players, I always look for defense, passing instincts first, and that's why I love Jackson in the beginning. But when you start looking for translatable skills, he just becomes a little bit less alluring. So right now, I think I might actually lean Bridges, but that would entail me having to go back and watch Bridges intricately too, so maybe I find more flaws with him.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's also a very flawed player as well, but like I think that's closer than what a lot of people would expect. I mean, I had Bridges, at like 7 before he decided to return to Michigan State, and I feel like I was, like, you and I were probably one of the two of the few people that had him, super high on our boards. That's why I thought it'd be an interesting question.
Oh, it's good.
In terms of Josh Jackson attacking closeouts, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him because, teams are just going to close out short on him and wait until he jumps and then go up with him and, contest the shot from there. And if he makes the shot, great. If he misses it, which seems to be a little bit more likely than not now, then they'll be happy with it. So I struggle to see him right now as a super effective guy off the ball, attacking closeouts and creating off the bounce from there, either for himself or for teammates. Where he's good is he's good in those little weave situations that Kansas would run, where they could get him the ball on the move already, and then he could handle and just utilize his natural speed and fearlessness attacking the rim. I like that idea. I like the idea of little handoff plays for him, where you just kind of do a wing handoff play and let him try and create in the middle of the defense. I think that if you get him the ball on the move, it's going to be really difficult for teams to stop him. And then once he's on the move, like you said, good instinctual passer on the move, makes some shitty decisions from time to time, but that's fine. You kind of take the good with the bad on a guy like that. And plus he's going to be able to finish at the rim, and hopefully he can develop like a little floater game at some point too.
Yeah, he can cut off balls. So if you don't guard him, which I'm sure a lot of teams aren't going to guard him really closely, he can at least slash and cut to the basket and finish around the rim and stuff. It just gets dicey for me because so much of his skill set I feel like translates better to the 4. And like you mentioned with the frame, he doesn't have the capability to do that. Like if he could play the 4, I'd probably have him number 2 overall in this class just because his game would translate so well there. If he could get him the ball in the high post, like a lot of the things he's done as Kansas, like being even the screener and pick and rolls, like when you get him in space and he can make decisions and he has a bent defense, that's kind of what I was getting at. Like he can be an effective player. It's just I'm not sure if that translates to like a primary wing creation setting or like a primary initiator type. I just don't see his skill set really being conducive to either one of those.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think he's like a primary initiator, which is something that's been raised a few times by people kind of talking about what his upside is as a handler. Let's kind of talk about the off the floor stuff. So was involved in two incidents off the floor. We'll say one was a hit and run where he didn't really tell anyone until like a month after it happened. And then the other one is a little bit more concerning to me because there was, a court document that had testimony or, you're the lawyer here. Tell me about this thing. Like it was, stated by, two girls on the Kansas women's basketball team, I believe, or at least one and maybe a friend or something like that, that Josh Jackson, damaged their car, like kicked out, like the back of a car, and then was yelling for a girl to get out of the car and say that he would beat her ass. So can you kind of explain the legal logistics around this that I'm kind of missing here by not being a lawyer, and how concerning they are for you?
Honestly, I feel like unqualified because I haven't researched this at all. Like weirdly enough, like I haven't gotten to even the off the court stuff with Josh at all. I really don't know like what he's done specifically. I try to that's the last level of my analysis, going through these guys off the court. How's their character? Are there any troubling concerns? So I really don't know the fact situation that closely.
Yeah. So I guess that the thing is here is like I wasn't there. I don't know what to make of this. Also, the fact that he was in a situation like this is concerning to an NBA team. Like, just full stop. Like, you have to make sure that if you're selecting a kid in the top 5, that you can trust them. And this was a case where he didn't portray trustworthy behavior as a human being. And he apparently, if everything within here is to be believed, displayed really poor judgment and displayed really shitty, behavior in a lot of ways. And there's not really any other way to put it beyond that. So an NBA team is going to have to get comfortable with the fact that, this all happened. And I don't know what kind of effect that could have on his draft stock yet, because we'll see once these teams meet with them and everything. He didn't go to the combine, obviously. So, once NBA teams meet with them, they're going to have to, these are all questions that he is going to have to answer, basically. This is all something that is going to be brought up, and he's going to have damn good answers for what happened.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really, at least me personally, I'm not going to build it too far into my analysis because, like you said, we're not there. We don't know the situation. But damn sure, right, NBA teams are going to ask these questions. They have to know. You're drafting the player and the person. And if he has these really, like, outlier bad, negative qualities as a person, you have to know about those things because we've seen that manifest on the court. Like, you're investing in the overall player. So, yeah, for sure, he's going to have to go through like a rigorous probably questionnaire as far as all these teams goes, for sure. Yeah,
and so this thing has, gone through the legal system. He was convicted of hitting an unattended car, and he now has to take like anger management classes or something like that. It seems like, we'll see. I don't even know what to really think about this. I'm pretty sure that the hitting the unattended car was the hit and run. But, he now has to, go through anger management, and we'll see what happens here, I guess. Like, again, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened here. Having said that, he's going to have to answer questions on it, and that is really the best way for us to end this part of the conversation.
Definitely.
So let's kind of talk about the next guy who I think that you're going to have a lot to say on.
I have many takes.
You have many takes. I'm going to let you handle the entire negative portion of this discussion. Okay. Because you have laid it out really well. I really appreciated the thing that you wrote. I think it was on Thursday. I retweeted it immediately as soon as it came out and after I read it. Like, it was a really, really well done thing on the concerns that Lonzo Ball has in terms of his translation to the NBA as a lead guard. Let's talk about the good before we talk about any of that, though. So Lonzo Ball this year was genuinely a culture-changing player at UCLA. He created a culture of total unselfishness. He got TJ Leaf to the point where he might go in the first round. Like, he got TJ Leaf paid. He got Ike Anigbogu to the point where he might go in the first round and get paid. He might get Bryce Alford an NBA shot, and I love Bryce. I absolutely think Bryce is one of my favorite college athletes that I've gotten a chance to cover. So nice, so, he was very good in the face of what was ultimately an incredibly negative situation at UCLA, and an incredibly toxic situation with his father and the fan base. The fact that Lonzo was able to put him in a position to where he was so successful off the ball that he could get an NBA look is really a testament to what Lonzo is capable of at the next level, I think. So whenever you put that kind of culture-changing, ridiculously high IQ player into a scheme, NBA players are going to want to play with Lonzo Ball because they know that they are going to get the ball in their hands in the perfect spot at every single time. They are going to get the ball in their hands often because he never pounds the ball. Like, he's not a guy that wants to bring the ball up the floor every time. He's happy head manning the ball, giving it over to Aaron Holiday if he thinks Aaron Holiday has the best lane to attack. He's happy to, get the ball up to Isaac Hamilton on the wing for a three-pointer in transition if that's the play. Like, he will do whatever it takes on offense to get a team into the most efficient possible situation. You go ahead and say what you like about Lonzo Ball.
I mean, I love him as like a superstar role player type. I think he just magnifies everybody else's play. He's that kind of enabler type where you put him on the floor, he makes the connecting passes, he kills in transition. I think his transition play is going to be fantastic as far as the outlet passes we know, the ability to sprint down the floor with the ball, go into the lane at least, and then kick it out for threes. He's really high IQ. I love him off the ball in the half-court sense as far as being a secondary handler type, keeping the ball going, running a secondary pick and roll. He has his spot-up shooting is above the break as far as depth. I think he can easily translate that. He shot really deep threes this year off the catch. He's got good fluidity there. I don't really question his off-the-catch jump shot very much. I think it's going to translate okay, and that seems to be one of the points of contention with him. I don't think that should be really the main emphasis. But, I mean, defensively...
Wait, are people worried that he's not going to be able to shoot off the catch?
I think people are worried in general about his shot translating. I think you have to parse through specifics, but yeah, I've seen a lot of people that are just worried in general, like, oh, the form's bad. It's like, okay, well, I mean, aesthetically it's not great, but if you watch him off the catch, it's actually pretty fluid. Like, a lot of the parts of his shot are good.
Oh no, like, he's going to be fine off the catch. That guy can shoot the shit out of it. Like,
that's what I think.
If he has space and time to get the shot off, it's going in. Like, just because he is a left eye dominant shooter that brings it across his body a little bit, that's not going to be a problem off the catch, and it's not going to be a problem going to his left. And honestly, and this is something that I talked to a shooting coach about, like, if he is going to his left, he's actually going to be a better shooter than, naturally off the dribble than what most others are, because he's going to be able to pick up the ball quicker. He has, we talked about rhythm being a major component of Josh Jackson's jump shot questions. Lonzo Ball has tremendous rhythm in his jump shot whenever he's going left. That right to left step back jumper for three, or, from wherever on the floor, that's going to be a weapon basically immediately for him in the NBA. I have no real problems in terms of his jump shot off the catch and his jump shot going to the left.
He's also an incredibly good cutter. I mean, that goes to his basketball awareness. Yep. Whenever a defender turns his head, that guy's going right to the basket. That's where you see the explosive lob catches. Like, there's a lot of things off ball offensively that I really like that he does. And then defensively off the ball, great instincts in the passing lanes. You see the smarts and the intelligence, knows when to double, knows when to crash down. He gets those crash down blocks that are really impressive. So his IQ level is just, it definitely comes through on both ends of the court. And there's a lot to like about him. I think that he has a really high floor, or I should say a high floor as a quality player. I think he can be like a superstar role player type. I just have questions about him being a primary creator, and that's where a lot of the value in the NBA is derived from.
Yeah, no, I think that that's absolutely right. Like, what he can do to a team's culture, like I said, and what he can do as a shooter, as a cutter, as this unbelievable potential role player, I think cannot be overstated, to be honest. Like, he is going to be that good, in all facets of the game that don't have to deal with him having the ball in his hands. Can you remember a player that generally seemed to think the game at such, I don't want to say that like he is an unbelievably high IQ player. He is, obviously, but I think that you have to kind of parse through it even more than that, because he sees the game genuinely 3 steps and 3 plays before they happen. Like he headmans the ball. He sees that you're going to have, TJ Leaf cutting to the basket, and then he sees that TJ is going to have a dump off to EK for a thunderous dunk before he makes the pass to Isaac Hamilton. Like he just sees everything happen far before, anything on the floor happens. Can you remember a player that since you've really been like covering the draft like this, that had that kind of IQ?
Not really. I mean, Ben Simmons is the only one that comes to mind. I'm not sure if he's on the same intelligence level. He just has the functional athleticism to where you notice the highlight passes more, if that makes sense, just because like he has that ability to beat guys one-on-one and then throw like a ridiculous pass on the move. Lonzo has more of just an IQ, like he'll move the ball and he understands defenses. Like he can call out defensive schemes during the play and exploit it. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody that does that to this level, just because he anticipates every weakness you have defensively. Even if he can't like capitalize on himself as far as breaking down a defense, he can capitalize it for others and get guys open without necessarily like having to break guys down off the dribble, if that makes sense. So I think overall I don't really compare anybody to Lonzo because he's so damn unique.
He really is. Like he is. Like everyone tries to like pigeonhole him into Magic Johnson and into Jason Kidd and into some of the other big lead guards that we've seen. He really is his own guy. Like he is unlike anything that we have seen really over the last 20 years, I would say, in the NBA. Like it's just he's going to be an interesting guy to track throughout the course of his career. Yep. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you, and I'm going to let you talk about all of the many concerns that you have with him as a lead ball handler in the NBA.
Well, I think it starts with his handle.
Yes.
I think it's more rudimentary. That's his biggest weakness, in my opinion. It's not the jump shot, even though he is predictable off the dribble as far as he wants to go left to pull up. It's much harder for him to go right and then gather and then realign himself. But It starts with the handle. It's very, very basic handle, crossovers. He doesn't get a ton of separation. He had a couple nice drives against Oregon in clutch moments this year, and I feel like that overshadowed a lot of his weaknesses in those areas. Yep. When you talk about a lead guard in the modern NBA, you're talking about ideally a 3-level scorer, and we know he doesn't shoot from mid-range. Maybe he can snake a pick and roll and weave back to the left and get that shot off. My concern with him at the point of attack is the fact that maybe bigs are just going to switch onto him, and he can't beat bigs one-on-one because he hasn't shown that kind of wiggle, and he's reluctant. Like we saw against Bam Adebayo, you can go down the list of all these times, Larry Markkanen even, where he got these guys on an island, and then he settled for the step back to the left 3. That's what he does. So can he actually beat defenders one-on-one in the NBA? Because primary initiators and primary ball handlers have to be able to do that. Otherwise, like you're an off-ball player for the most part. So that's where I question him. Then you move into the finishing aspect.
Well, hold on. Let's handle this one aspect at a time here.
Fair enough. So proceed.
The ball handling is something I've been calling out all year. I think that it's a major, major concern that he still is as rudimentary as he is. He does have a good crossover. I think that point has to be made. Right to left, left to right. He can create separation with that crossover. The problem is that I think once he gets into the NBA against, more athletic players, longer players, that separation is going to be cut down a little bit. Yep. So you bring up the lack of wiggle and the lack of, really it's like a lack of hip flexibility, I think, don't you?
I agree. And you see that manifest in the finishing capacity. I mean, he's not a very flexible athlete. He's pretty upright in everything that he does. I think his top end speed is good. He's explosive in space. He's a pretty good he's not a bad athlete. He's okay. It's just he's not flexible and he's not like herky jerky. There's some limitations there.
Oh no, he's a good athlete in space, but the lack of hip flexibility makes him a less functional athlete whenever you
absolutely
him.
Yep.
So 100%. I think that you've kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of his lack of ability to really. I don't know. He doesn't have any sort of shake to his game, right? And whenever you don't have any sort of shake, you have to just have the fastest first step that anyone can imagine to play in the NBA, right? You basically have to be like Ty Lawson.
And he doesn't have that.
Right. Like he doesn't have that giddy up. Like he's a good athlete, like you said, but he's not like this elite lateral athlete or like elite, downhill athlete who's just going to get by his man with a first step. So I think that that's a very real concern. Like, I think that the fact that he doesn't have a ton of shake paired with the fact that he's really maybe only like a slightly above average athlete, if that really, I think that average might even be more fair. The fact that he's that and has those two factors combined is going to really limit his ability as a lead ball handler.
And he's predictable. I think that's in conjunction with that, you know what he wants to do, and every NBA defense is going to shade him to the right. We've talked about this and force him to shoot that way. They might just outright switch everything that he does and force him to play in isolation. I think those are two really large concerns. And even when he gets to the rim, this is someone who, his instincts in a lot of aspects of his game are really good. His instincts as a slasher with the ball are not good. Like, he stops short way too often when he's slashing. He picks up the ball and then throws up this upright, like, scoop shot kind of thing. And it's not very refined. So when he on top of the fact that he rarely gets to the lane as far as, like, drives, unassisted drives for 40 minutes, like, he's really low in those capacities. You can attribute some of that to UCLA's offense, but this is a guy who had pristine spacing to work with. He had driving lanes. He had opportunities at times that he either passed on or did not excel in. So I don't know what level on the court outside of these step back to the left threes, and like that. The thing about him is he's so damn efficient at everything, right? That's why all the draft models have him number one, is because he's so damn efficient. But I feel like so much of that is noise. Like the finishing is a lot of that is off-ball cutting, finishing at the rim. The shooting is a lot of step back to the left threes, which I think defenses in the NBA are going to take away. They can stay closer to him. They can challenge him more. Can he beat NBA-level lead guard athletes one-on-one or even in pick and roll? So there are more concerns there than meets the eye for just this general statistical guys who think, oh, this guy could be the number one pick in the draft because he's so elite statistically. But there's just no valid argument for me to look at that and be like, this guy can be a primary creator.
Yeah, like, you remember you watched the Kentucky game, for instance, and really the first one sticks out in my mind more than the second one, the first one that UCLA won. I mean, Bam Adebayo had no problem switching out onto him, and to be honest, looked more athletic than Lonzo. Like, he was cutting him off in terms of whenever Lonzo was trying to get penetration. Like, he had no issues, really.
Yeah, and that was a common theme throughout the year. I mean, that wasn't just that game. It was a lot. Like, it was pretty consistently where it was not just the limitations, it was also the reluctance, but those two things in conjunction made this person who could not even beat most bigs on switches when he needed to. So, I don't know. I mean, it's just hard to profile a guy like that as an elite level contributor because we know the value of initiation at the NBA level, of self-created offense, and if he can't do that, what do we really have to compare him to? Like, the best off-ball player wing in the league, or one of the best, is like a Klay Thompson type, but he doesn't have that kind of release. Like, he can't shoot like Klay can as far as like over contests and like the very, very like small spaces. Like, it's just hard to compare like his off-ball contribution because you're getting elite passing, you're getting elite transition play. But I feel like he's a lead guard in transition, and then he swings over to the 2 in the half court, and I don't really know how to monetize or assess his value there.
Well, to be honest, I mean, that's what he did a lot of the time at UCLA this year. Like, he was their lead guy in transition, and then Aaron Holiday often kind of initiated the offense. Or, Lonzo would initiate it from the corner or from the wing. Like, he would tell everyone where to go. He'd point them, like, to every single perfect spot to get them into the offense. Like, so much of what... So, like, everyone talks about the stat models that have Lonzo at number one because of the efficiency. But so much to me of his value can't be measured statistically, right? Like, you watch him on the floor, the way that he just kind of orchestrates his teammates, and you can't put a value on the fact that, like, UCLA passed the ball, like their teammates passed the ball because of that culture of unselfishness. They knew it was coming back around, so they had no problem passing up a good shot for a great shot. Like, I don't know how to value that, and I also think that the statistical value that we've kind of talked about is very noisy because of the fact that, I think that something like 13% of his points this year came off of off-ball cuts, or 12% of his points this year came off of off-ball cuts, which is a crazy amount for a point guard.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason I like him to like the Lakers, and I have no problem if they take a number 2, is because of the similarities between the UCLA system and LA system as far as being a pass and screen away team. You want him like moving the ball, playing off the ball. I think that's a perfect fit for him. If he was going to a team that wanted to run him in like a 1-5 pick and roll setting, I'd be completely out. But this is someone who can excel. We've seen him excel at UCLA. He was used optimally, in my opinion, at UCLA. That was a perfect system for him. So if he goes to the Lakers, there's a lot of commonalities there. I think he can excel. It's just it comes down to the fact that is he really, like, value-wise, is he the second best player in this class? Is he the third best player in this class as far as what he can bring? Because honestly, I've never seen really a skill set quite like his. Yeah,
like, I mean, the fucked up thing on what might happen in LA is, like, if you read anything that comes out of, like, Magic Johnson's mouth or, like, that front office, like, you know, reporting that comes out of that, like, they're like, oh yeah, Brandon Ingram is our only guy that's untouchable. And they're kind of making it clear that they're not super pleased with D'Angelo, it seems like to me, right?
That seems to be the common narrative. I don't know. I don't get this whole, like, Lonzo be the point guard, D'Angelo's the shooting guard. D'Angelo's a better on-ball, like, dribbler and pick-and-roll player than Lonzo is, and I don't think it's relatively close. I think they actually complement each other pretty well offensively. It's just,
I agree.
Of course, like we've talked about in the past, defensively it's a train wreck. But offensively, I think that they can coexist, especially in that system where both of them can play off the ball. D'Angelo can create when he needs to in isolation or in pick and roll, but mostly Lonzo is going to be kind of a co-handler, and I think that's what his utility is going to be.
Right, like you let D'Angelo kind of create late in the shot clock. If you need to run a pick and roll to get a shot, you need to just ISO on a guy to, you know, find some sort of look at the end of shot clocks. But, you know, Lonzo can get you the transition looks. He can get you in and out of your offense efficiently. He'll get everyone, like I said, he will create a culture of unselfishness on your team. And like I was going to say, like, the fucked up thing is, like, it feels like the Lakers might trade D'Angelo whenever in reality D'Angelo is exactly what Lonzo needs to have, like, his utmost success at the NBA level, I feel like.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's funny because that's the minority opinion, what I've seen. It's all like you're going to replace D'Angelo with Lonzo at the point guard. D'Angelo wasn't getting it done. Well, it's like D'Angelo actually brings, like, the skills that to the lead guard position that Lonzo doesn't have, and vice versa, kind of. I mean, I think D'Angelo has good vision, but his decision-making is not on the level of Lonzo. Lonzo executes better than D'Angelo does, and I don't think it's relatively close. But as far as offensively, I think they can coexist really well.
Yeah, me too. And honestly, defensively, this is something that I've talked about Danny LaRue, I think, on his podcast, is like Danny has a theory, and I think that it's his and Nate's, obviously, but, like, you know, switching defenses tends to keep guys a little bit more engaged, like guys that can fall asleep more often off the ball, maybe a little bit more successful in switching defenses because they're just more engaged. They're more into the flow of the defense because they have to be. Otherwise, if they miss an assignment, everything's fucked. So, like, I like the idea of putting those two that are 6'5", 6'6" into this hyper switching system where everyone is between 6'5" and 6'9" and just letting it roll. Like, play Larry Nance, Julius Randle, Brandon Ingram, and those two in the backcourt, and switch everything and just see what happens.
I mean, that's the way to do it because we know Lonzo struggles at the point of attack, navigating screens. He doesn't have elite foot speed, moving laterally. D'Angelo obviously is, you know, he's not very good there either. So if you're going to have these two big guys, especially if Lonzo can put on a good amount of strength, or at least a respectable amount of strength, you should just switch everything. You can always pass guys off. Like if you switch Lonzo onto a big, you can always pass him off to another guy and rotate out. That's what the good teams do anyway. So that would be the scheme I would try, and I think that's probably what they'll probably end up doing that. I think that Lonzo goes too, and they probably work that out.
Yeah, and, you know, we'll see what happens, I guess, in terms of the draft. I don't think it's like a sure thing that he goes number 2. I think that he is definitely the favorite in the clubhouse. But, like, the thing is, ultimately, no one knows for sure how Magic Johnson is going to run this thing, right? Like, nobody is certain that Magic is, like, a rational actor, quote unquote, in the front office. Like, the fact that he went out and likely just didn't get a chance to scout as much as other general managers and everything like that. You know, Rob Pelinka obviously was dealing with agency business throughout the entirety of, or at least like the first half of this season. You know, didn't get a chance to get out on the trail necessarily as much as one could have expected. Like we just don't know what they're going to value yet. And this draft is going to be kind of a test case, I think, for what they end up valuing. And we'll probably gain more by what they do at number 28 than what they do at 2 in that regard. But we just don't know yet, basically.
I don't even know who else is really in the conversation. I mean, I've heard De'Aaron Fox linked to them, Josh Jackson, of course, but outside of those three, like, where else do you see them going? Could they go anywhere else? Do you think they can go Tatum?
I don't think they will. I think that they should absolutely bring in Tatum and see what they think. Like, traditionally, the other part of this too is traditionally the Lakers have been an organization that put value in individual workouts more than a lot of teams put value in individual workouts. Will Magic put the same value in those things? I have no idea whatsoever. So, we'll find out. I just don't know what to think of this entire situation yet. Ultimately, I do think that Lonzo, given a lot of Magic's comments in the media and how he sees some of himself in Lonzo, I think that's the direction they go, but I don't know.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox that's the weird one for me, just because people think that's a good fit because he can defend point of attack and he's like that more natural point guard than D'Angelo as far as getting to the rim. I just feel like that puts too much emphasis on De'Aaron as your primary moving forward, and then D'Angelo's like really a 2. And De'Aaron doesn't really fit that scheme at all. Like as far as like passing and screening away and shooting, like that's not his game. Like, I don't know what the fit is there. I guess, like, just the tournament play and the recency bias. I know some people have validity in being higher on him. It just seems like that whole narrative has really took swing, and I don't see the argument for him at number 2, personally.
But Cole, dual lefties.
That's fair. I guess you can, and then with Randall, too. You just roll them all out.
3 lefties. We're set. All right. Let's go to number 5 here, the last player we're going to be breaking down today. Jonathan Isaac. I think I'm a little bit higher on John Isaac than what the general consensus is. Is that right?
You probably are. I think I have him 4, so you're a little bit lower than me, but we're in the same ballpark here.
All right. So the reason I like Jonathan Isaac is I think that he has an exceedingly high floor due to how good he is defensively. If you look at statistical indicators, he is one of 5 players in recent college basketball, I want to say going back 8 or 9 years, that has put up what is it? It's like a 6% block rate, 2.5% steal rate, and a 25% defensive rebounding rate. One of those guys is Anthony Davis, who is really good defensively, been on the all-defensive team twice. Another guy is Andre Robertson, who is probably going to make the all-defense team this year. Do we think that's right?
He should. He's freaking incredible defensively.
Yeah. Another guy, Dwayne Dedmon, who we have seen really blossom into an awesome defender at the big man position for the Spurs this year. They were 5 points better in the regular season with Dwayne Dedmon as their center than without him on the floor. And then the fifth one is Eric Murray, who, kind of washed out of, didn't wash out of college basketball. That would be totally unfair, but was dismissed from both LaSalle and West Virginia for, a multitude of reasons, we will say, all of which, if I remember correctly, were like immaturity based. That's kind of what you're talking about, though, with Jonathan Isaac. You're talking about like elite level defense to pair with a burgeoning offensive skill set that could see him become kind of the ideal stretch 4 in today's NBA.
Okay, so that was my first question for you, is how high do you see the offensive ceiling? Because there are 2 kind of Jonathan Isaac fans. They're the guys that are like you, and I think myself, who value his defense appreciably high. Like, I think he's probably the best defensive player in the draft. I think OG is right there, but I have more questions with him physically. But Isaac has a lot of versatility. I really love him on that end. But offensively, you have another kind of grouping that has him as this potentially high ceiling wing creator. And I don't really see that wing creation as far as his general his feel level is okay. I think he can make simple passes. I don't see anything special there. And as far as, self-creation, his only move really in isolation is like a jab step to the right, pull up left. I don't see a ton of him. He doesn't have great burst. The ball kind of slows him down to me. But if you start pushing him down positions to like the 4 and maybe some small ball 5, that's when I think you can get some offensive utility from him, because then his skills become somewhat rare for those positions. I think he has enough there as far as being able to handle the ball. He can grab and go a little bit, very, very situationally at Florida State, but he did show that on film. So there are some skills there, but I'm more in the camp that you are, in that his defense could be probably the best in this draft, and his offense could be good enough if he can space the floor, where maybe he can do some ancillary stuff like put the ball on the floor a couple of times, make a simple pass. I don't see primary wing creator, though, for him. Yeah, look, I mean, I consider, whenever I do this number, percentage of possessions that end in pick and roll, percentage of possessions that end in post-ups, and percentage of possessions that end in isolation to be these creation situations, right? Like situations where they are creating with the ball in their hands. In post-ups,
for the level of efficiency that they have, shown over the course of, or the lack of efficiency that they've shown over the course of the last few years. It's still valuable to know if a guy can get his own shot, even if it's in the post or in the mid-range post on the, at the elbow or something like that. Jonathan Isaac's percentage was 16.1% of his possessions were finished in creation situations this year. You have to go all the way back to 2014 to find someone that, where that number isn't almost cut in half. Aaron Gordon at Arizona in 2014 on what was a loaded team that went to the Elite Eight, finished 24.4% of his possessions in creation situations. That's still way, way, way higher than what Jonathan Isaac did this year. And I know that you can kind of point to the idea of, he had Dwayne Bacon and Xavier Rattan-Mays, and they pounded the ball the whole time, and, he just didn't get an opportunity. Well, Josh Jackson had Devontae Graham and, National Player of the Year Frank Mason in the backcourt, and he still had 26.1% of his possessions ending in creation situations. I don't really see John Isaac as this high-level creator with the ball in his hands. I see him as a guy who will be able to likely knock down threes at a consistent rate in the future. I believe he hit 35% of them this year. I think there are a little bit more concerns with the jump shot than what have been portrayed this year, but nonetheless, I think that he'll be okay as a jump shooter. And then after he gets okay as a jump shooter, he's going to be able to attack closeouts, take a couple dribbles, knock down a mid-range shot, maybe take 3 dribbles into the lane and, lay a ball up at the basket. But he's going to be a little bit more limited, I think, in terms of his ability to create than what, a lot of people think he can be. One thing that he does have going for him, though, he's a really, really good off-ball cutter, really, really good off-ball player in general in terms of motion and mobility and, kind of reading and reacting what he sees around.
Yeah, I just think he profiles really well as a 4. He has that modern kind of NBA game. I mean, he's not quite the playmaking 4. You don't have quite that level of confidence in his passing on the move and stuff like that. But
not a passer.
He does have he has the two-way ability. And if the jump shot translates, right now, not that great from range. I think that's mostly a strength issue with his shot. When he shoots deep, you see him miss short most of the time. It looks projectable in time. Not the fastest release, but if he plays the 4, that becomes less concerning because he has more space to operate in most settings. So I like him offensively as far as I think his shot's going to profile okay. He has enough of a baseline skill set to where I think he can improve as a dribbler, as a passer, enough to be adequate. I'm not saying playmaking potential. I don't see him catching in the mid post against wings and being able to create there. I just don't know. He might be able to elevate over a lot of guys and shoot. And if he shoots well, that's something else. But as far as just creating for himself and for teammates at a high level, he doesn't have really the strength. He doesn't have the frame to do that. He gets dislodged when he attacks the rim. He's not really fast. His burst isn't great. So really just relying on that shooting offensively. And then defensively, we should probably break this down a little bit more as far as just subtleties. This guy could be someone who can protect the rim and also guard 4 or 5 positions. That does not happen very often. No,
that does not happen at all. He is one of the better lateral athletes at 6'11" that I can remember. We're all very excited about what Thon Maker is doing right now in Milwaukee, right? The fact that he's able to, switch out due to his lateral agility onto 1s and 2s and at least cut off penetration for a couple of slides. John Isaac, was better at this at Florida State than Thon Maker was in high school at, being put into space and doing some things. And obviously you don't get as much of a chance to do it in AAU settings where you have to go out and, guard ball screens and switch defenses and stuff like that. But you can see a little bit of it nonetheless. And, Thon Maker was always a very laterally quick athlete, but, Isaac, I think, is at a higher level. He is, just an incredibly functional lateral athlete, in the college game where Florida State ran a scheme that was relatively similar to what he'll likely run in the NBA. Florida State had maybe the most athletic team in college basketball this season, I think, this year. And, they ran a constant switching scheme that often, or I would say in entire part of the time, most of the time, they played man defense. And, he was kind of the linchpin of being able to, have a big man that can come out and basically cut off penetration from almost any college point guard.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Dragan Bender, not necessarily because of the scheme.
Way quicker, though.
Yeah, he's quicker, and Bender has better feel. I just feel like overall, I think his ability to sit down in a stance is something you don't see very often from that size. Like, he can really sink and slide, and that's a rare quality to have. And he kind of has Bender's ability and the switchability in that respect. Maybe a little quicker, not the feel offensively, of course, but just kind of a similar archetype, how he can be used as a versatile big man defender at the next level.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. You brought up the idea of him really sinking down into a defensive stance and sliding. He is really good at that. He is really exceedingly good at that. The concerns I have on offense, and I kind of didn't bring this up, he's known to be, kind of a guy that struggles with confidence on that end. Like, he doesn't really, I don't want to say like he doesn't know how good he is, but like for a player that is, like most players at that level have kind of an outsized view of their game, right? Like they often think that they're better than they are at some level. I don't know if he thinks he is as good as he is or not, but like he definitely doesn't have that like outsized view of his game where he's like, all right, I can take this guy. I'm just going to attack him now.
He's definitely not like a confidence assertive kind of player. He's not like Tatum where he has really high, feel, and as far as like his confidence in his own game, he doesn't translate as a scorer that way. He doesn't have that kind of mentality, and that's something you have to look at. Something I missed on with Jamal Murray, as far as just seeing that, just that confidence in your own ability, that to keep shooting, to keep creating for yourself. He doesn't profile that way. He profiles much more as like an ancillary kind of defensive two-way player that can shoot and then just play a bunch of roles and positions. And I think he's wired to do that. He does the little things well enough. Like you said, he's a good cutter. He's a really good rebounder for his size. He's okay off ball defensively. He messes up somewhat, but I mean, a lot of the young guys do. I think he can probably get better in that area. But his strengths to me are more like the ancillary superstar role player types, and I think he can be really good there. Yeah,
no, I agree with that. I guess the question is, we have him both in our top 5. How good is that player if he can be an all-defensive team member, which I think is a very realistic ceiling for him, right? Like, he can be a guy that could make an all-defense team in the NBA that averages, let's say, like 13 or 14 points a game while not bringing the, crazy playmaking creation abilities of a Draymond Green.
It's tough. I mean, it depends on the shooting. If he can shoot at a respectable level, I think that player is really valuable. If he can add enough strength to potentially play the small ball 5 in the playoffs, that's a whole different level. I mean, you're talking about probably 5 guys max who can do that, probably profiling moving forward. If he can do that, like, there's a lot of ancillary skills that could make up to a very valuable player that might not like transcend or like maybe like stand out as far as in the creation settings, but he's bringing that, like the defense, the high level, like if you have to pay attention to his shot, if there's any kind of gravitational force there, he becomes a lot more valuable, and you can't really capture stuff like that with the stats.
Yeah, and with the shot, I think that he's really good from a standstill because he is really good at just having solid balance, solid rhythm throughout the course of his body. I think there's a little bit of offhand interaction on his jump shot at the top, which can easily be ironed out, with a good shooting coach. On the move, the balance gets a little bit knocked off, I think, and the alignment gets a little bit knocked off. And, it's something that he'll really have to work on is, he is a good balanced athlete as it is. So I think that he is a very capable jump shooter in terms of can a coach work with him and get him to the point where maybe he can run off of a screen and knock down a shot, or maybe like kind of, fade down to a corner off of like a back screen for a, maybe like a hammer play or something like that. Can he do that on the move? I think he can probably do that. The key is going to be, what is his functionality like running off of pin downs? Like, I don't know if he's ever going to do that, but even so, like there are a few 4s in the NBA that can really do that. Like if you just have him stand above the break, knocking down 3-point shots at a 35% clip, that is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. And I think there are a few 4s. His dribbling to me is a little bit better than meets the eye for a lot of people. I'm not saying he's like high level as far as isolation, but I think he's overqualified as far as putting the ball on the floor in a closeout or even getting to his pull-up. I think he's more than capable of doing that. And he's shown some fluidity out of the move. Like you said, the mechanics kind of break down a little bit, but I think he at least projects to be okay there. And for his age and somebody of his make, you just don't see that kind of fluidity overall. Like, I know he had a couple like 2-dribble, like pull up, like fadeaway jumpers earlier this year that you saw, and you're like, okay. I mean, I don't think it's going to translate to like an isolation setting, but I mean, in space, if he gets the ball and he can attack like a big space on a closeout attack, I think he's going to be fine there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you just get him the ball and, he pump fakes and he can take like 2 straight line dribbles to the elbow. Like, I think he can do that, not have a problem. And I think that that's a really, really valuable skill to be able to add to your toolbox.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he just brings a lot of different skills that maybe aren't high-level creation skills that people value from, box scores and stuff like that. I think he'll just be more impactful than what meets the eye, kind of like Lonzo will to a certain extent. And ranking those two is fascinating for me. I don't know how you obviously have Lonzo a little bit higher. I don't know. I look at their 2 games, and I'm like, I think that Isaac's defensive ability is a little bit surer of a bet than anything Lonzo brings.
I think that what it comes down to for me is that Lonzo's effect on offense is a little bit more than Isaac's effect on defense, because you can kind of just go away from Isaac, right? Like, if you really want to, the offense can just like kind of take him out of the game offensively, right?
Yes.
You can't really do that with Lonzo, I don't think, because he's so effective in transition and because he's going to be able to be a point guard like in the move. You can probably take him out of the game in half-court settings, and you can try and slow the game down in a way, but he's so good at creating transition opportunities that it's harder to take him out of the game. And ultimately, like, we can just talk about this, offense is more important than defense. Like, it has been shown statistically at this stage that offense is more important than defense.
Yeah, I think the point you made about being able to take somebody away defensively, like even you can kind of try to scheme like even a Kawhi Leonard out of the game defensively, and that actually hurts the Spurs because he's so good. There's been articles about that are pretty good. I agree for the most part. I don't know. I hesitate a little bit just because of Lonzo's transition emphasis, and in the playoffs when the game slows down, I think you can marginalize his half-court game to the point where maybe I think that Isaac can be more effective defensively, even though teams can also scheme to take him out of the game.
That's a great point.
I go back and forth with that just because they both bring they're the 2 kind of superstar role player guys in this class to me, where I see them filling like specific roles and being very effective in them. It's just having to weigh those 2 against each other is pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I do think that I definitely default to Lonzo, but I understand why you would kind of consider both sides of that. I guess that I think Lonzo is just going to have a larger impact on team culture and everything. You know what I mean? Like he's going to create just like this unselfish culture in a lot of ways. Like, kind of talking through this a little bit, like on the show, I think I kind of might like Lonzo a little bit more than Josh Jackson after like really going into the weeds on it. I'm not like 100% sold on it or anything, but I don't know. I don't really know. And one thing we didn't talk about with Lonzo, which I kind of specifically avoided within that section, was talking about the father, but it's worth pointing out that Lonzo's dad is not going to stop a team from taking him, and he is not going to like have an impact once Lonzo gets to the NBA, I don't think.
Yeah, I've never even given his dad a second thought for the most part. I know that teams obviously do care about that stuff. I mean, that's on their radar. I'm not saying it's not going to stop them from drafting him. I don't think any team that's going to be the case, but it is a factor. I mean, how can it not be when you have somebody so publicly probably critiquing every move that you make, and that has to weigh into the decision-making process a little bit. I don't think it's going to weigh up to enough to actually make a difference, but it's definitely on the minds of people.
I mean, if you're the Lakers, right, and you have Magic Johnson as your president of basketball operations, and Magic Johnson goes and tells LeVar, you need to shut the fuck up, in the most polite way, because Magic is, from everything that I've ever seen in my life, a very polite man. Do you really think that LeVar is going to like criticize the Lakers? Like, I get that LeVar is his own guy and, has very clearly never been one to be quiet and has always had these issues. But like, I don't see a way that, like if Magic Johnson tells him, dude, you need to be quiet, that this is going to be an issue.
I just hope they get it on film. I don't really care what happens after it, but just get that conversation on film so we can watch it. I want to see LeVar get put in his place. That'd be kind of interesting.
Yes, like I am I'm all in on that. Sell pay-per-view tickets. Like, you could 100% sell tickets to that. Like, the Lakers organization would make millions of dollars for that conversation.
They actually would. That's the funniest part, is that it would actually be profitable for them.
Like, 200,000 people would watch that. And if you sold it for $5 a pop, 200,000 people would buy that. I have no doubt about that.
I would.
Yeah, I would too.
That'd be incredible.
Like, I would not even think twice about it. So if you're looking for a phone number, my number is 412. Magic, reach out. We can set this up. I'll bring a camera. No, I'm joking. Cole, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have anything else you want to chat about? Draft related, high school basketball related, life related, anything that you want to chat about, man? I mean, I've taken up 100 minutes of your time. Do you have anything that you want to get off your chest?
Do you have any sleepers in this class that you feel very strongly about that you like more than the consensus?
I think I'm probably 15 spots higher than most on Jawun Evans.
Okay.
I have him as a borderline lottery pick.
So do I.
Yeah, he's unbelievable at creating space.
Really like him.
Yeah, he is absolutely incredible to me in the pick and roll. I think there are going to be some questions in terms of, can teams just attack him defensively, and is his vision amazing? I'm not entirely sure, because a lot of those little point guards, you really do have to have awesome vision, unless you're just Isaiah Thomas. Or if you're Nate Robinson, but Nate Robinson's not worth taking in the lottery. So I do have that concern a little bit, but like I said, he just creates separation in such a very real way that, he reminds me of a Ty Lawson with a little bit more, a little bit more polish maybe in the pick and roll. Ty was just a blur and could get by you, but, Jawun's a little bit more of a tactician in a way, a little bit more of a polished threat in the pick and roll. But having said that, I think the comparison is similar in the way that I think they're going to be more score first as smaller guards that are going to struggle around the rim because they're not great vertical athletes, but they have good floater games. They can shoot. They can kind of affect the game in a lot of different ways.
I totally agree. I really like him as a backup point guard at the very least. I think that he's kind of exactly what you look for in a backup point guard, being able to come in low minutes and get your own baskets, but also create a little bit for others. He can push the tempo and kind of increase the pace of play. I like a lot of things about him. I think that if you're looking at him from the vantage point of, I think he could probably start on some lower level teams and stuff like that. But if you're looking at competitive teams, I think he's ideally a backup, but I think he could be a really valuable one.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the most likely scenario in a lot of ways. But, Ty Lawson at one point was a top 10 point guard in the NBA before
Definitely.
All of the stuff that happened in terms of DUI and everything. Hopefully Ty is in better shape now. Another guy that I really like is Jordan Bell. I think he's the most NBA ready defender in this.
You gotta be kidding me, dude. We agree on way too much. That was my other guy. You're killing me.
Yeah, Jordan Bell is, to me, like I said, the most NBA ready player in this draft. I think that he's probably not a great rebounder in the NBA. The numbers say that he's going to be okay, but I do worry about the fact that he has relatively limited standing reach. I think that you probably are going to want to play him with a traditional big, which means that if that's the case, you do need to play him with the traditional big that can shoot, or you need to develop his offensive skill set more. But, I mean, the guy is legitimately capable of guarding 1 through 5 in the NBA.
I love him. I don't care. If you give him Ike Anigbogu's measurables and his physical tools, that guy would be incredible.
Oh, he's going in the top 10 if he has Ike's tools.
Oh,
Ike's frame even.
Yeah, and he doesn't have great physical tools. I just love him as a basketball player. I think his offense is actually kind of underrated. He can pass a little bit, on short rolls. He can hit those skip passes. He's got good IQ. I think he can fill a role off the bench. Obviously, I think he's a backup player for sure, just because of his physical tools. I don't see him ever starting. He's not skilled enough to be a 4. He's not big enough to be a 5 and anchor there. But in the playoffs, this has kind of been my argument, is that as a situational player, I think he can stay on the floor in the playoffs and play some 5, maybe some 4, depending on who your big is. If you have not Myers Leonard, but somebody like that, right, who's more competent than Myers Leonard, that can space the floor and you can put Bell in pick and roll offensively and stuff like that. I think he can be a really valuable player because he can actually play. He can switch, like you said, most positions. He can guard in space. He can protect the rim a little bit. And on offense, he's not like a total nothing. Like, he can pass. He can dive. I mean, he's pretty athletic. So, I mean, there's a lot there, I think, that people aren't looking at, and I think he can be an impact player, like maybe in a reserve role, but still impact.
I think the Lakers should take a very real look at him at number 28, and in fact, I think they should probably take him if he's at number 28. The other team that I really like for him is the Knicks. If the Knicks can, like, if he would fall to the second round and he falls to like 33, 34, 35, and the Knicks can find a way to move up from 44, I would pair him with Kristaps Porzingis in a heartbeat, and not even.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's super interesting to me. That fits more of what you'd look for as far as pairing him with a shooting big, and also protect the rim and move a little bit in space. That'd be really alluring.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Bell is going to have an argument as the best athlete in this draft. Like, maybe not like the most functional in terms of the way that he can handle the ball, like a Josh Jackson, but like the way that he utilizes his athleticism on, you know, anybody. I mean, I think set the record for, you know, lane agility among guards, bigs, whoever at the NBA draft combine. And that shows on tape. Like, this is not something that, you know, is kind of a phony number. Like, it shows on tape that he is an unbelievable lateral athlete. Like, he can switch everything. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he plays physically, he's powerful. Yeah, and the passing ability, I think, like you said, is really, really underrated. It's going to allow him to play a really good role on offense in the NBA.
Yeah, there's a lot of bigs in this class with movement skills, but that first, like, immediate reaction, that reactionary athleticism, he's the only one that has that elite one. I think he was guarding, I want to say, the Michigan point guard, and he had, like, this quick back step that I saw.
Yeah, I've
never seen anybody react that quickly for a big. It was like Walton moved and he was right there. He was mirroring him, and it was like, holy shit, this guy can move. And you see his general speed on those chase down blocks in transition, which is just absurd. Yeah. Like, he can cover floor space so quickly. He runs down guards. So I think in the right system, if you get him in transition where he's going up and down and he can really run the floor and utilize his skills, like, I think he can be an impact player.
Yeah, like, I have him at number 28 right now. Like, I have him as like a first round value. I probably will move him up to like 25 at some point here. Like, I really like him. I have Derek White as a first rounder, and I feel like a lot of people aren't there yet. A lot of people are trying to find like the next Malcolm Brogdon in this draft, right? And they're pointing to Josh Hart, I think, is like the main person.
Yeah.
I kind of think Derek White is a lot more analogous because he's 6'5", 6'7" wingspan. Was on the All Pac-12 defense team, although I think there are some concerns in terms of his transition defensively. But he's a 6'5" player that can handle some lead guard duties as well because he's a really good passer and a really good shooter.
I've only seen him at the combine, and his floor game really stood out as far as just playing the right way and pick and roll, making reads. Yep. His lack of strength stood out. I think Dylan Brooks bulldozed right through him once, so that was an issue. But this is someone he's probably one of my last 5 guys where I really have to go back through the tape and dig into him.
Yeah, no, I'm a pretty big fan of him. Is there someone that you really don't like that you think?
Oh, good. I mean, we've already talked about De'Aaron Fox.
No, we're not. Like, I mean, like lower down. Like, let's say, like, you know, outside of the top, like 12 or 10 players that we've talked about.
Really, like any of the 5s, to be honest. But I don't think that's really hot takey. Like, this class is just all the 5s are just ridiculously flawed in some way. I think Zach Collins, I have him as the only lottery prospect just because I feel like he is the least flawed and he gives the most upside on a two-way ball. But, I mean, a whole bunch of all the centers, like Jared Allen is kind of intriguing skill set-wise. I mean, going back and watching him, I think he's a little bit more skilled, but I still have concerns. So just that general grouping. And then TJ Leaf is another guy I've been lower on the entire time than pretty much everybody. And I remember when he was like kind of a lottery pick, and I just never saw it defensively, lacks the physicality. And you have to worry about the Lonzo factor a little bit there as far as making him look better than he is. I think that there's some merit to that, even though like his floor spacing helped Lonzo reciprocally. But I guess TJ Leaf would be one of the lower end guys that I'm not really that high on.
I have John Collins at number 13. I feel like you're not going to be high on that.
Oh, I am not high on that. No.
The reason
We disagreed, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm pleased with this. I know that you, I think you retweeted my John Collins thing that I wrote earlier this week.
I did.
What were your impressions of that?
I don't know. I mean, I know he's ultra productive, and if you put it in like the general context of how productive he was, it's kind of intriguing. And I know that he shot well at the combine from NBA 3 or something. I think he was like 16 of 25 or something. I can't remember what was reported.
Oh yeah, I couldn't give less of a shit about that.
Yeah, so that's the problem with me. It's like when I actually look at his game, like he's a good athlete, of course, and even the games that I watched, most of his points came off post-ups or transition opportunities, and he looked really fluid. He's a good athlete. It's just when you project him to a specific position in a specific role, like what the hell is that? Like, is he a backup 4? Is he backup 5? Like, I don't think he can protect the rim well enough. I don't think his off-ball defense is that good, like on the interior. So really, what the hell is he?
Yeah. Basically, I think he's just going to be a guy that plays with like a crazy high motor that is a relatively intelligent person. Like, he's very emotionally intelligent. If you speak to him, he's very self-aware. He knows where he needs to improve. From all intents and purposes, from what I've heard, he's a really hard worker. Made a great impression with NBA executives at the combine and team interviews. There's a lot to like about him. Ultimately, his swing skill is going to be one of two things. He either needs to become like a really smart lateral defender in a way that he is very much not right now, or he needs to become a really, really good shooter from out to like 20 feet. I don't even know that he needs NBA 3-point range, but if he can play the 4 and shoot 20-footers, I think that's enough. Whenever you throw in the fact that, he's one of also like the best offensive rebounders, maybe the best offensive rebounder in this class, and then also has ridiculous touch around the rim, and is going to be just productive by sheer force of motor.
So would you like not this is like a precise comparison, but is like Kenneth Faried someone you would comp him to? Like what are you going for like archetype wise here?
Like bigger Kenneth Faried maybe? Like it's hard for me to comp anyone to Faried because nobody has that motor. You know, like even like John Collins, who I think does have a really, really good motor on the floor. He's still like, he does kind of have like similarities though. He doesn't have like that like hyper competitive, like, flying around like an animal motor, but he does, he's like high motor with efficiency in terms of movement. And then also has the same lapses defensively that Faried has, where, Faried will just get lost and will be a little bit apathetic and, generally just doesn't have the length to, affect a lot of other players. Maybe with a little bit more height, I think that Collins can maybe be a little bit more effective in terms of just, contesting other players' looks. And, he's a good lateral athlete. Like, he's a good vertical athlete. It's just that he has no awareness right now. And he's 19 years old, and I kind of hope that he can figure it out.
He just reminds me of Faried with like a better chance to shoot, but maybe not, like you said, not the like insane motor, but just kind of that general kind of player. And I just have trouble. Maybe that's a productive player. I just have trouble putting him into a specific role at the next level. And if I can't do that, I become significantly less high on you if I don't know what role you're going to play. And I know the league's downsizing and stuff, but even then, you need specific skill sets for specific positions to thrive, and I just don't see that for him right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, in terms of like finding a specific niche for him, and especially in an NBA where this has been like an underreported thing that I wrote about in the John Collins write-up that I did, like offensive rebounding has been at record lows each of the last 4 years. If you aren't going to allow him to just like chase offensive boards because you're worried about the effect that it can have on your offense or on your like transition defense, then his value is really stunted. But if you put him in a situation like Chicago, where I know Chicago is going to chase after offensive boards, I love it. Like, I think he can be really super effective there.
That's definitely fair. And I mean, the only issue with that
is very scheme player, very much a scheme player.
A lot of guys are. I totally agree. But in the playoffs, I feel like teams even more so get back in transition defense because they're so hyper scared of giving up these like easy baskets. Is that going to profile well? But at like 13 or whatever, you're just looking for a quality NBA rotation player. So that's probably getting the analysis too deep, even that point.
Yeah, no, it is. It's ultimately once I hit that level, I was like, okay, who do I trust to be an NBA player? Like among those big guys, who do I trust as who is going to be like a productive member of NBA society? And I mean, it's hard for me to look past John Collins putting up like 19, 9.5, and 1.5, and the only other like freshman aged players who have done that in the last 25 years be Kevin Durant, Michael Beasley, and Joe Smith. Yeah,
that's nuts. I mean, like you said, the article just contextualized his production in elite fashion where I did a double take. I was like, okay, I did not know that. But still, I mean, it's just hard for me to profile and project him.
It is. It's really difficult. And I mean, the crazier thing is he did all of that in 26 minutes a game. Like, we're not talking about a guy that like played like too many minutes like Jared Allen did at Texas. Like he couldn't stay out of foul trouble for half the year and was playing 26 minutes a game and did that. He's unbelievable. He had that like 12-game stretch of going 20-10 in the middle of ACC play, which was maybe the deepest, most talented conference of, I would say maybe since the big old Big East, like with Marquette and like all those teams.
Jeez.
Or like whenever Marquette like first joined. Like, it's hard for me to look past that, I guess. Like I am still someone that really values productivity, and I haven't looked at a lot of statistical models because I tend not to like them, but I would imagine he rates highly.
Is there anybody in this class that you don't like? The same question that you asked me as far as lower end guys that you're out on.
I'm probably a little bit more out on Justin Patton than I feel like a lot of people are.
I'm with you.
I guess that like the main guy is Ike.
Okay.
I don't know what he does other than just be like a really large tank, like that can block shots and offensive rebound. But like I'm even someone still that struggles to see a ton of value in Clint Capella, knowing that I'm wrong about it, you know?
Well, James Harden helps.
Yeah, I mean, if Clint Capella doesn't have like this hyper elite pick and roll point guard, then what is Clint Capella?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of archetype, if you're going to be like Tristan Thompson-esque, you better be able to guard on the floor like in an elite fashion. And obviously Tristan Thompson has the best playmaker maybe ever on his team. So it's hard to fit those kind of guys in, like those lob dunkers offensively that they aren't much else. They don't have any skill level. And then defensively, he can protect the rim. He tries to block everything. He's a good rim protector, but he really has to be really, really good in space, in my opinion. And he looks okay there. His awareness is a little poor, but there's workable tools for him to be decent there. But without that kind of knowledge, I don't see a ton of upside in a developmental player on a rookie scale contract. I think you brought this up last time, like investing in this kind of guy when what is the real upside?
Yeah, like it's another reason that I have concerns about John. Like, I like the idea of him in a lot of ways, and if he was going to be willing to be a stash, then I would be happy to let him continue to grow in France. But if he wants to come over immediately, I don't know when you're going to get a ton of value out of him as a rookie scale contract player. And it's the same with Ike. Like, Ike, the other concerns with Ike, I guess, are that not only is he extremely limited in terms of skill set, but he is also like under 6'10", 250 pounds already with like 5% body fat, according to the combine. I like that's probably like peak physical condition for him. Are we worried about him potentially just like putting on weight in the future and maybe like struggling to stay at like an extremely exceedingly playable weight? Also, he's had like injury issues over the course of his youth career, and obviously he missed some time early this year as well with a knee injury, I believe. So I just have concerns about what his future looks like and how much value you get out of him on a rookie scale deal.
Yeah, I didn't even factor in the injury concerns. Those are like on point for sure. I mean, if he loses any kind of explosiveness or any kind of mobility, he's a tools guy, right? So he can't lose that stuff. He's kind of like OG, but OG has more to fall back on, of course, as a perimeter defender. But yeah, for me, I mean, I don't know. he would have to be like a Thompson level elite perimeter defender for me to really be interested in him, and I didn't really see that on film.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely agree with that there. All right, Cole. Tell the people where they can find you. Tell the people what you have coming up. Tell them where they can find your awesome Lonzo Ball story that you wrote, I believe, for Thursday.
So right now I'm doing probably 4 pieces a week for the step back. I'm breaking down all the lead guards in this class. So I just did Lonzo Ball late last week as far as his driving and finishing. Before I had done ball handling and shooting off the dribble. So in conjunction, I've done 3 pieces so far. I have to do De'Aaron Fox, which is probably going to come out on Tuesday. And then I'm going to run into... Oh, yeah, that's going to be fun. You might not want to read that one. Other people should. I'm
not super high on De'Aaron. Like some people have him at 3 or 4. Like I have him at 6. Like I'm not crazy high on him.
I also have him 12, so I'm low on him compared to the consensus. But the driving, the finishing stuff is definitely one of his strengths. So we'll see. But yeah, at the step back, I'm going to do probably pick and roll passing over the next week, and then get to defensive eventually. Me and Chris Stone over there are going to start working on a team fit series of fitting these guys in their optimal schemes. And then, of course, I do the What's on Draft pod with Mark Whittington and Javier Pesquera. We did an episode earlier today, which for some reason is not posting to iTunes. But when it does, you should check that out because we broke down kind of what we did tonight with Sam on just going in depth on these top level prospects in the top 10. And we'll eventually get into more of the team fit analysis as well.
Go follow the What's on Draft podcast on iTunes. I swear it will eventually post, like Cole says. They will figure that out. Go follow Cole's work over at The Step Back. Go follow him on Twitter at Cole Zwicker, Zwicker. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. We are presented by CLNS Radio. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings, which helps us gain more listeners. We will be back on Wednesday. I've already recorded part of a really good podcast with Matthew Tynan on the San Antonio Spurs. I will have another team within that podcast. I have not decided on who yet. Really, it will probably depend on what writer for each specific team I can find over the course of the next 3 days because I'm going to a wedding over next weekend in Cleveland, Ohio. I think that's about all I got for you guys. Oh, on Monday, Memorial Day. So when you listen to this, I will have up a EYBL breakdown from all of the action that I saw that we talked about earlier on the podcast today. Keep it locked here, and we're going to have a lot of really awesome stuff here going forward into the future. But until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.